Life's much easier without that worthless wife.
Yeah, but I need her around, 'cause she's my ATM. The day after I left for a business trip, I was at the front door of my houses, where Harry and Karen were waiting for me. And I overheard their conversation, both laughing loudly. Am I an ATM? Worthless wife? As soon as I heard that, I felt a surge of anger, ready to confront them. But I held back my anger and decided to leave quietly. They always said the reason our family wasn't working out was because of me. But from what they just said, it was clear I was their lifeline. To them, I'm not even a person. They must just think of me as some money-carrying robot. Even though I was at the front door, neither of them seemed to notice I'd come back from my trip. And that made sense because I had told them I would be gone for 2 days. So why did I come home so early? It had something to do with advice from a certain someone. My name is Catherine Davis, 48 years old. I'm married, but even at this age, I'm still working full-time. Well, actually, I'm the CEO of my company now. In simple terms, I'm the boss. When I was young, I never imagined it would come to this. I always dreamed of being a stay-at-home wife. So why am I still working so hard? There's a clear reason. My marriage to Harry, my current husband, completely changed my life. I was a shy bookworm from a young age, and after graduating college, I got jobs at a small publishing company. Though I worked for a publisher, most of my tasks were in sales. I wasn't good with people, but I pushed myself to overcome that, working as hard as I could. The folks at the company really took me under their wing, and I worked even harder to repay their kindness. I was lucky to be surrounded by good people, and before I knew it, I found fulfillment even in sales, which I used to dread. Eventually, I got more opportunities to do editing and proofreading, the kind of work I really wanted to do, and I poured myself even more into my job. When I heard my former college friends, who had taken other jobs, complaining about their work, I realized just how lucky I was.
I think I'm reaching my limit. At least I made it 3 years. Maybe I'll find a good marriage prospect somewhere. I aim to get married and retire from my job.
They all decided they'd try their best for 3 years and then switch jobs. You could tell just by looking at them that they were exhausted. I had overtime, and work was exhausting. But not once did I think about quitting my job. 3 years have already passed. Thinking like this made me realize just how fortunate I was, and I lived each day savoring that feeling. As more time passed, about 5 years into my job, I had an unexpected encounter, even though I never thought about quitting my job to get married. I met Harry Davis while on a sales visit, and we started dating. Harry was different from me. He was the quintessential sales guy. He was a great talker and even introduced a deal I brought into his boss. Thanks to that, it led to a major deal, and the company I worked for made a big profit. Since he was a bit older than me, Harry became someone I looked up to, especially at such a young age. Over time, that admiration turned into love, and we became a couple. After about 3 years of dating, Harry and I decided to get married. He introduced me to his parents, and I was brought to his family's home. That's where I first met his mother and father. Both of them were easygoing and approachable, and they were overjoyed about our marriage. By that time, Harry's father was already bedridden due to illness, and his mother was taking care of him mostly alone, since Harry had to work. Despite working, Harry helped care for his father since he was still living at home. Both Harry and I planned to find a new place to live after getting married, which would leave his mother and ill father alone. From that day on, I visited Harry's family home several times. I got more opportunities to talk with his parents, and gradually, I grew fond of them. Would it be all right if I moved into your parents' place and lived with them? Feeling bad about leaving his elderly parents alone while we moved into a new place, I proposed this idea to Harry. Your dad's sick, and it's tough for your mom to handle everything alone. I think I can manage well with both of them and want to help them. Harry hesitated a bit, but eventually agreed and brought it up to his parents. At first, they both declined, saying they didn't want to be a burden, but eventually, I convinced them, and we ended up living together. Even after getting married, I continued working while managing the household with my mother-in-law, Karen. Unlike when I lived alone, I had more responsibilities, but I was genuinely happy with this life. However, 5 years into our marriage, we still hadn't had any children. Harry and his parents encouraged me, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. By the time I turned 40, I had naturally given up on having children. Harry has an older sister, but she's single with no children. It was a shame not to be able to give his parents a grandchild, so I devoted myself even more to my work. Then suddenly, loss came our way. My father-in-law, who had been ill for a long time, passed away. When he was taken to the hospital, the doctor had already said, "There's no chance of recovery." We knew a day like this would come eventually, but losing the man who treated me like his own daughter was beyond heartbreaking. It was the same for Karen, who became even more withdrawn than I did. Losing a husband she'd been with for so many years, it was only natural. Her smile vanished, and she spoke less and less. Even when I tried talking to her, she often seemed lost in thought, and Harry was clearly worried as well. But no one could ever replace my late father-in-law. The once cheerful atmosphere that Harry's parents brought into the house was gone, and the place now felt heavy and dreary. Around this time, Harry also began to change. He started speaking harshly to me, ignoring me, and everything in our life seemed to fall apart. My marriage began to crumble right after my father-in-law passed away. Harry, who had never been much of a drinker, started going out drinking almost every day. That kind of lifestyle took its toll, and one day Harry got drunk and went out of control in a pub. Though the other customers managed to restrain him, Harry ended up with a serious injury that left lasting damage to his leg. Harry had been the one to start the fight at the pub. Even though the other person was injured too, Harry's injuries were more severe, so they decided not to press charges. After some negotiations, they reached a settlement, and Harry received a large sum in compensation. On top of that, Harry, who had sustained a serious injury, started receiving a significant insurance payout every month. For him, the money is transferred, even if he doesn't work himself, and I am at work every day. Without consulting me, he decided to quit his job.
Given what happened to my body, it's better for me to take it easy rather than push myself to work. Maybe if I take my time recovering, I'll fully heal someday.
Even so, Harry started going out even more often than before. Around this time, Karen also began to regain some of her old energy. However, she had become like a completely different person, nothing like before. Losing her husband had taken a toll on her mental health, and despair and anxiety seemed to take over her heart. Her once gentle eyes had turned sharp and wild, and it was clear she found joy in berating me. Because of her many fears, Karen began to dote on Harry excessively. She treated Harry like a small child, lavishing him with affection, while she began to resent me. Seeing how drastically Karen had changed when she used to care for me as well, filled me with a deep sense of fear and sadness. The kind father and mother I knew were gone. To make things worse, even Harry was no longer on my side.
It's your fault I can't see my grandchild's face because you couldn't have children. Sweet Harry has become so reckless because of it, and now look at what's happened to him. You'll have to work for the rest of your life to repay him.
Her words were inconsistent and made no sense. She spewed unreasonable accusations at me day in and day out. Even so, every time I heard Karen say, "You couldn't have children," it cut me deeply. It was just baseless spite. It wasn't all on me. Harry could have been part of the problem too. But there was still some lingering guilt within me, and perhaps out of a sense of atonement, I poured even more effort into my work. "Harry, Karen's been acting a bit erratic lately, and there are days she seems really down. Maybe she should see a doctor?" I finally decided to bring it up with Harry, only to be immediately dismissed, and he even told his mother what I said.
You think I'm crazy? You heartless witch. Everything in this house is messed up because of you.
Although she was too old to actually get physical, Karen verbally assaulted me as if she might pounce at any moment. Her paranoia was intense, and even the way she looked at her son was off. It was clear she was mentally unwell, but there was no way I could take her to the hospital in this state. I had no choice but to endure it and continue taking care of both of them. Meanwhile, contrary to my personal life, my career was going well. The aging president of the company personally named me as the next president. He would step down to become chairman, leaving me to run the company as president. With Harry's injury compensation running out soon and the settlement money dwindling, I felt I had no choice but to accept this offer. Of course, it was an honor and a great opportunity, but when I thought of Harry and Karen, I couldn't be entirely happy about it. Harry and Karen soon learned about me becoming the president.
For someone like her to become president, this world's coming to an end. Well, she has to earn for Harry too, so I guess it's a good thing.
By then, I had no idea whether Karen was genuinely praising me or being sarcastic. There was no point in arguing, and I knew she would never go back to being the kind person she once was. Such give up had taken hold in my mind. Harry still refused to look for his job, using his lingering leg injury as his excuse. To be honest, it seemed like he had gotten much better. But if I said anything about it, they would gang up on me. Knowing that, I didn't feel like saying anything. As long as I kept working hard and making money, things wouldn't get any worse. For some reason, I truly believed that, but soon my peace was shattered. Harry started having affairs repeatedly. The first time I caught on and confronted him, he looked genuinely ashamed. But then Karen stepped in.
Who do you think is to blame for this? It's your fault he has to release his stress outside, since you couldn't give him a child. And it's also because you're always glaring at us with that scary face.
I thought infidelity would mean the end of my marriage. But when I was blamed by both of them in such an unreasonable manner, I started thinking maybe I really was at fault. Even though Karen had lost her mind, she still knew exactly how to hurt me. It was like I had been brainwashed, and all I could do was apologize repeatedly. Since then, Harry's affairs and his late-night outings became something both his mother and I tolerated. When I stopped to think calmly, I knew it was wrong. But I had no one to talk to, and I was too ashamed to bring it up with anyone at work.
You better reflect on your behavior too, you know? You're only able to live this good life because I married you. Who else would have married someone like you besides me?
Harry wanted to instill inferiority in me, to put me under his control. He wanted to make me believe that everything wrong in our family was my fault. In the beginning, they might have realized how irrational they were being towards me, but now it seemed that they were starting to truly believe they were in the right. I genuinely felt that the mother and son were losing their sanity. This wasn't sustainable. But there was nothing I could do by myself. Not knowing who to turn to for help, time just kept passing. One day, I had to go on a business trip for work. I'll be away for a couple of days, but as the president, I need to go myself. I'm really sorry, but could you use this money to order takeout and have meals with Mom? I apologized to Harry and Karen multiple times. Though they complained endlessly, they both understood that without me, their livelihood would be affected. Harry reluctantly agreed to my business trip, demanding $500 for food, saying, "This isn't enough." Grateful that he at least let me go, I gave him an extra $100 and left for the trip.
Life's much easier without that worthless wife.
Yeah, but I need her around because she's my ATM.
The day after I left for the trip, I was at the front door of my house, where Harry and Karen were waiting for me. And I overheard their conversation, both laughing loudly. Am I an ATM? Worthless wife. As soon as I heard that, I felt a surge of anger, ready to confront the two of them. But I held back that anger and decided to leave quietly. They always said that the reason our family wasn't working out was because of me. But from what they just said, it was clear I was their lifeline. To them, I wasn't even a person. They must just think of me as some money-carrying robot. Even though I was at the front door, neither of them seemed to notice that I'd come back from my trip. And that made sense because I had told them I would be gone for 2 days. So why did I come home so early? It had something to do with advice from a certain someone. About a month ago, I got a call at work saying someone wanted to talk to me.
It's a woman named Emma. Do you know her?
Feeling suspicious, I took the call.
Sorry for calling out of the blue. I'm Harry's sister. It's been a while since Dad's funeral, but I wanted to thank you for always taking care of our mom and my brother.
If she needed something from me, she could have come to the house directly, so I asked why she was calling instead.
I didn't want my mom or brother to hear. I know it's a strange thing to ask, but have you been struggling? If you'd like, could we meet in person to talk?
It was true. I hadn't seen Harry's sister since the funeral, and honestly, we weren't close. When Harry and I got married, she barely made it to greet us, and as far as I knew, she never came home to visit. Could it be that she was also looking to get money out of me? Frightened at the thought, I went to the cafe where she'd asked to meet.
Sorry for showing up out of nowhere after all this time.
This might have been the first real conversation I'd ever had with Harry's sister, Emma. Like Karen used to be, she was gentle and had a kind demeanor. Given my experiences with Harry and Karen, I found it hard to let my guard down around her. But as we talked, I somehow became certain that there was no malice in her. This woman had come here to help me. Emma then got to the point.
I never came home because of Harry. I loved our parents, but I'd always felt disgusted by Harry. I think it's his fault our mom ended up the way she did.
She then started talking about Harry's childhood. She had noticed his violent tendencies since they were kids. If something didn't go his way, he would throw a tantrum until he got his way. Over the years, those outbursts became less frequent, but instead, he started manipulating people he didn't like, bending them to his will.
He's confident and has initiative, doesn't he? That's why people around him were drawn to his charisma and followed him. He would crush anyone he didn't like, even getting others involved.
I thought it was Karen who had started bad-mouthing me, but apparently it was Harry who had fed her those negative thoughts. With her support gone after my father-in-law's death, Harry must have thought he could control her. He also justified his affairs by making it seem like it was my fault for not being able to have children, urging his mother to blame me. Karen, emotionally vulnerable, likely had no choice but to rely on the remaining son and began to hate me.
A while back, our cousin come to pay her respects at Dad's grave. After hearing what things are like now, I realized I couldn't keep running away anymore.
Emma had kept her distance from their family out of fear of her brother's violence. But now, with their father gone and their mother changed,
I need to deal with my mom and Harry. I know you've been suffering, Catherine, but please, you need to take back your own life too.
She gripped my hand tightly, as if trying to withstand her fear, and spoke with determination. Her hand was trembling slightly, and her palm was damp with sweat. And so, she and I joined forces, beginning to plan how to put a stop to Harry and Karen's behavior. Harry and Karen had nothing to say, so I had only learned about Emma in the past few weeks. She wasn't married and lived alone. She was a dedicated career woman, working in the HR department of an IT company. She used to be an engineer, and her sharp mind was still very much intact. Emma meticulously planned out what needed to be done to hurt Harry and Karen and free me from the mental hold they had on me. Of course, at that time, I didn't believe I had been brainwashed, so I only found out later what she meant.
Harry can't handle it if things don't go exactly according to his plan. So, Catherine, we need you to disappear for a while.
At the time, I couldn't fully understand what she meant. She told me to lie about a business trip and leave the house for a bit. But if I disappear, why not just leave the house forever? Emma smiled at my question and replied,
This is all part of the plan.
I was instructed to tell them I'd be gone for 2 days, but to return the next day. Even though I still had doubts, I decided to follow her instructions since she insisted it was the right first step. In the end, I returned home earlier than I had said I would and overheard the insults Harry and Karen were saying about me. After listening to what they really thought at the front door, I went straight to Emma's apartment. There, I spoke with her.
There was a specific reason I asked you to return home that one time.
But I didn't do anything. I tilted my head, not understanding what she meant.
I timed it so that, just as you were returning, I called my mom. I asked how Catherine was doing after Dad passed.
Hearing this, I slowly began to understand her scheme.
In other words, I stirred things up with my mom and Harry so they would badmouth you to break Harry's hold on your mind.
While talking to me, Emma realized that my mind had been affected. It was clear that Harry and Karen were saying unreasonable things, but I kept explaining that it was my fault. No matter how much Emma explained, in the end, I couldn't betray Harry and Karen. So she resorted to drastic measures. In other words, she let me hear directly what Harry and Karen really thought of me. Just as planned, hearing myself called worthless and ATM directly set my anger ablaze, and I finally realized how unreasonable they were. It made me want to grab them right then and there.
When you're told every day that you're the one at fault, it just becomes that way without you even realizing it.
Emma encouraged me, tears in her eyes.
You don't have any more attachment to those two, do you? You understand now that you were being treated unfairly, right?
I couldn't say that I felt no pain at the thought of betraying the mother-in-law who once cared for me, but I also knew I couldn't leave things as they were. Determined, I prepared myself for the final showdown. It had been about a week since I disappeared. My phone was filled with hundreds of missed calls, and I could see just how desperate Harry and Karen had become. Now that I had gone, their entire foundation had been shaken. If things continued this way, Harry would have no choice but to start working again. His plans had gone completely awry, and he seemed to be in a panic. For the record, I had also made sure to explain the situation to the authorities in case the police were called. I told them that I was hiding from my husband and Karen due to their constant verbal abuse.
All right, I think it's about time you reappeared. My guess is that Harry must have lost a lot in his desperation.
And so, Emma and I headed to their houses, the battlefield for our final showdown.
Where the hell have you been? You abandoned me and Mom, ignored our calls. You ungrateful piece of trash.
The moment I stepped into the houses, Harry came rushing at me, eyes bloodshot. It seemed like he hadn't been calm at all over the past week, and he hadn't even bathed. His clothes and body reeked, the stench hitting my nose. I grimaced and looked at Harry with nothing but contempt. Not long after, Karen followed him to the entrance, her face twisted in rage.
You heartless witch. You abandoned us and ran away. I'll have you arrested.
She also had disheveled hair and bloodshot eyes. They must have realized how bad things would get without me. The two of them hurled every insult imaginable at me. Did they really think that doing this would convince me to come back?
Stop humiliating me any further. Do you have any idea what Dad would think, seeing me like this?
As I calmly said this, Emma stepped forward from behind me and walked in. Her face was filled with anger, and she glared at both of them.
Why are you here? This is between me and my wife. Stay out of it.
Harry cursed at Emma, but she paid no attention to his words. She walked straight into the living room, her footsteps heavy and deliberate. Do you really have no idea why I left? I asked them, but Harry and Karen just looked at each other, shrugging in confusion. Were they pretending not to know, or were they genuinely clueless? I found myself astonished. You called me a worthless piece of trash and an ATM, didn't you? When I came home early, I overheard you both loudly bad-mouthing me. I stated the facts plainly, glaring at the two of them. They must never have imagined I'd heard them. A look of shock spread across Harry and Karen's faces. That's right. You never imagined I'd come back early. But if I hadn't, do you really think I would have heard those exact words? They kept insisting it wasn't true and denying it, but as they faced the cold stares of me and Harry's sister, their words gradually trailed off. It's really disappointing to know that's how you felt. This is outright disrespect, isn't it? You've hurt me far more deeply than you can imagine, yet you've only thought about yourselves. Realizing how bad things were getting, Harry opened his mouth.
Did you trick us? Acting like you're the victim here. Give me a break. What do you mean hurt? Mom and I are the ones who are shocked at what you've done to us.
Shocked? He didn't feel that way, not even a little. Don't twist the subjects. Right now, we're talking about the emotional pain I've suffered. Don't use convenient words like acting like a victim. I'm just stating the truth. I yelled loudly, refusing to let Harry and Karen control the conversation.
Harry, I heard you've been cheating on her. Although, from what I've guessed, that's probably ended recently, hasn't it?
Hearing Emma's words, Harry stiffened and glared at her.
Did she put you up to this? What the hell did you do?
Emma couldn't help but burst out laughing.
Is it my fault? Did you just try to get money from that other woman? You panicked about Catherine leaving and got scared about your future. You've always been like this. When things don't go your way, you panic and do something stupid.
Just like she said, Harry had gone to ask his mistress for money, and she dumped him. Desperate after I left, he dug himself deeper into trouble. Now he'd lost the woman he was infatuated with and was about to lose his wife too. With no job, if I left him, Harry would lose everything. You really are an irredeemable idiot, aren't you? How did I ever let myself be controlled by a guy like you? I'm disgusted by my own stupidity. You know, your sister saw through everything you did and played you like a puppet. Harry was shaking with rage, his face bright red.
Cut it out. Both of you.
He slammed his fist down on the table and stood up. Neither I nor Emma were intimidated by this. We remained expressionless, fixing him with our cold stares. Do you understand the situation you're in? If I say I want a divorce, it's over for you. You won't be able to do anything or even make a living without me. Your life will be over. Just as Harry used to do to me, I threw those curse-like words right back at him, piercing his mind.
Mom, it's really unfortunate, but you need to take responsibility too. At least go to hell with your precious Harry.
After Emma finished speaking, I took a divorce form out of my bag. I had already filled in my part. After everything you've put me through, you don't think you can refuse this, do you? If you sign here, I'll at least hold off on calling the cops. I looked into Harry's angry face and spoke as if I were reprimanding a child. With trembling hands, Harry signed the divorce form. After carefully checking it, I showed it to Emma as well before putting it back in my bag. I won't call the police, but I'll definitely be getting alimony from you. I'm not backing down, so if you want to hire a lawyer, go ahead. Oh, but I guess you don't have any money left, since you can't do anything without me. I threw all the pain and resentment I'd been carrying back at Harry. I glanced at Karen, who seemed to have collapsed to the floor, crying. Emma had been recording everything on her phone just in case, so Harry couldn't lay a finger on us. Not that Harry had the guts to do that anyway. Did you really think you'd marry that young woman you fell for? It's honestly pathetic. Still unsatisfied, I left with those final words and slammed the door shut behind me. Thanks to Emma's help, I was able to escape from that hell. It feels almost like a lie now, thinking I used to believe I was the one at fault. Now, all I feel is hatred for Harry and Karen.
We can't get back the time you lost, Catherine, but at least I feel relieved now. If things had continued the way they were, an unimaginably tragic end would have awaited us. Now I can face Dad with pride.
Emma showed concern for me and continued to support me in various ways afterward. From what she told me about Harry and Karen's current situation, I can confidently say my revenge was a success. I took Harry to court over his infidelity and won as much alimony as possible. Apparently, the money came from what his mother had saved up just in case, but this outcome was the result of their own actions. Harry hasn't been able to find a decent job and has been doing hard physical labor on a daily basis, moving from one day job to another. Due to the stress and financial hardship, he's lost a lot of his hair and aged rapidly.
With his appearance and lifestyle now, I guess he'll never be able to go after his beloved women again.
According to Emma, Harry has completely broken down and cries himself to sleep every night. Those dark nights will never end, and he'll live with regret for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, his mother's mental health took a turn for the worse, this time for good, and Emma had her forcibly admitted to a hospital. According to the doctors, there's no chance she'll ever be discharged. If she had worked together with me to overcome things after my father-in-law passed away, she wouldn't have had to spend the rest of her life in loneliness. Now free from the long years of suffering, I've started a new life. No longer burdened by guilt toward anyone, I'm living for myself. Even at work, now that my worries are gone, things are going better than ever. Having the time to focus on myself has opened up a lot of new opportunities. And during this time, I found someone new in my personal life. I thought I was done with my marriage, but I met a man with a similar background to mine. Though he shared the same thoughts about marriage, we both ended up deeply in love with each other. We chose not to marry, but that decision actually made our relationship stronger. While putting ourselves first, we also take good care of each other. Sometimes things work out well precisely because both of us have been through painful experiences. Though I've missed out once again on my childhood dream of being a stay-at-home wife, I've regained my happiness. From now on, I'll keep looking forward and continue to walk my own path in life.
Get out of our house, all of you.
It was a few days after my husband, Mike, passed away when suddenly 9 of his relatives barged into our home. Apparently, they believed this house was theirs, and I, an outsider, should leave. But I couldn't help but burst into laughter when I heard their claim. Not knowing the full story, they glared at me, demanding to know what was so funny. Don't you all know? I then revealed to them a certain wish that Mike had entrusted to me before he passed. Hearing this, Sarah, my mother-in-law, and the rest of them went pale. Shocked by the truth, they were left completely speechless. My name is Emily Williams. I'm 52 years old and work in the kitchen of a local restaurant.
Emily, can you stay late today?
Hey, come on, you know Emily can't work overtime right now.
That's right. She has to visit her husband in the hospital, remember? We all agreed we'd cover for her until he's discharged.
Oh, that's right. Sorry about that, Emily. You can head out on time today.
Our restaurant is one of the most popular places in town. Cheap, delicious, and huge portions. Because of that, there's always a long line of customers every day. I used to happily take on overtime, but recently, my husband Mike was diagnosed with cancer and is now in the hospital. So, I've been leaving work right on time to visit him. Mike is 2 years older than me at 54. We've been married for 30 years, and this is the first time he's faced such a serious illness. Although it was discovered during a routine checkup, The cancer had already spread to several places, and after the diagnosis, his health rapidly declined.
I'm so pathetic. Working from home all the time drains my strength.
He works from home as an interior coordinator. Since he worked as a freelancer, he was able to handle all his tasks with just one laptop. Thanks to that, Mike took care of most of the housework, leaving me free to work from morning till night. However, after he collapsed from cancer, I had to ask my workplace for a favor and change my work hours. I go to work early in the morning and leave before the busiest times. I want to take care of him as much as possible. That's why I asked everyone for help, and now here we are. I'm so sorry for all the trouble I'm causing everyone.
What are you talking about? If you keep looking that down, your husband's going to worry when you visit him.
Yeah, go see him with a smile and take good care of him. If things get rough, the manager can handle both the front and the kitchen if he has to.
Hey, what am I, some kind of superhero now?
My coworkers all laughed, full of good spirits. When I first asked for help, no one hesitated or made a face. In fact, they were the ones who suggested I leave early every day. Even the manager, despite how it might affect the business, adjusted the schedule just for me. I'm so lucky to work in such an amazing place. When life settles down, I'll definitely repay everyone for their kindness. With that thought, I thanked everyone and clocked out. I quickly got ready and rushed to the hospital.
Hi, Emily. Perfect timing. The doctor's with your husband right now.
As soon as I arrived, the nurse greeted me warmly. I hurried to Mike's room to find him talking with the doctor.
Hi, Emily. Glad you could join us.
Oh, you're done with work?
Mike, 2 years my senior. He was always mistaken for being younger than me due to his baby face. But ever since the cancer, he's aged dramatically. Now he looks his age, or maybe even older. The energy has faded from his face, and even his smile is weak. At first, he would smile and say, "I won't let this illness beat me," full of energy. But the body doesn't lie. Contrary to his words, he's been getting weaker and weaker.
I was just telling your husband about the progression of his illness.
How is his condition?
I'll explain it myself, doctor.
Mike interrupted, cutting off the doctor before he could speak. At that moment, a sense of dread washed over me. The doctor, seeming to understand, nodded, bowed his head, and quietly left the room.
Emily, how long have we been married?
Mike suddenly murmured, gazing out the window. Worried more about his condition than his question, I hesitantly replied, "It's been 30 years.
30 years, huh? It felt like a long time, but looking back now, it went by in the blink of an eye.
Don't say that. It sounds like you're giving up."
Another 6 months.
Mike muttered as he reminisced about the past. The way he spoke made it sound like he had accepted the end of his life, so I hurried to stop him from continuing. But he continued, turning his gaze away from me.
I've got 6 months left at most, probably less. I know my own body better than anyone.
He smiled faintly, lowering his head. And in that moment, my worst fears were confirmed. Tears welled up in my eyes.
Sorry, I promised you when we got married that I'd never make you cry.
Noticing my tears, Mike lifted his head and gave a troubled smile, gently wiping them away with his fingers. But I could see tears forming in his eyes too, which only made me cry harder. I couldn't hold back the sobs that escaped me.
When I get to the other side, I'll have to apologize to your parents. Sorry for making your daughter cry, I'll say.
Stop it. Life without him, it would be unbearably lonely. We used to joke about wanting to go together when the time came, so we'd never have to face life alone. But hearing him speak as if he'd already given up on living made me furious. Don't talk like it's over. You don't know that for sure.
Emily.
It's not set in stone yet. Medicine has come so far, and if we look for a different hospital, there might still be a chance.
I'm not going to make it.
As I desperately shouted, trying to reject reality, Mike gently held my hand and continued softly.
I'm going to be gone soon.
No, I can't accept that. I won't.
I want to do everything I need to before I go, and I want to spend every last moment with you.
With that, Mike began to share his wishes for the time we had left.
I don't want to spend what's left of my life in this hospital. I want to go home with you, back to our house. And I know you have work, but could you take a few days off? I want to go on that trip we planned. I want to fulfill all the promises I made to you. Please, let's make that happen.
He bowed his head deeply. And with that gesture, I was struck by the harsh truth. This wasn't a dream. This was reality. It was really happening. I realized I had to accept it, and though tears kept streaming down my face, I told the doctor about Mike's wishes. The doctor respected our decision and immediately began preparing for Mike's discharge. After some final tests, he would be able to go home the next day. And so, Mike was about to begin his final stay in the hospital.
Mike, I came to see you.
Hey, how's it going? Are you about to kick the bucket?
Oh, Emily, I didn't know you were here. I thought it was just Mike.
Since there was still some time before dinner, I decided to stay with Mike a little longer in his room. Suddenly, Sarah, Mike's brother John, and John's wife, Linda, came in for a visit. It's been a while, John and Linda. John, Mike's older brother, is 55, just 1 year older than him. He works in construction, though his habit of slacking off has left him without any real position, even at 55. He's just going through the motions at work. His wife, Linda, is 34, young and quite pretty. But her sharp features and even sharper tongue always left an impression. She's fine with other people, but for some reason she's always been hostile toward me. Then there's Sarah, Mike's 74-year-old mother. Despite her age, she's still full of energy. However, her nasty personality was evident on her face, and she was extremely greedy when it came to money. She adored John but completely neglected Mike. I can't stand Mike's family. Just like earlier, John often makes insensitive jokes without a second thought, and Linda probably dislikes me as well. From the moment we met, she's seen me as an enemy and never misses an opportunity to make a snide comment. As for Sarah, her treatment of me and Mike makes it feel like she doesn't even see us as people. She's only interested in him for his money. Every time we see her, the conversation quickly turns to money.
John has a big family, and you two don't have kids. You're both working, so you've got plenty of extra money, right? Can't you spare a little to help out?
It became routine for her to beg for money like that. John's family includes Sarah and a total of 9 people. His previous wife left him, and he remarried while raising 4 stepchildren. They had 2 children together, and their life became impoverished. Since they couldn't survive on their own income, They started begging us for money.
What do you all want?
What's with that tone? Your own mother comes to visit, and that's how you greet her.
Yeah, Mike, you should take care of your mom. She's been lonely ever since Dad passed.
The change in Sarah and the others' attitude began after my father-in-law passed away. He was a strict man, but very fair and reasonable. While he was alive, Sarah never acted this way. The family used to be close, everyone getting along well. But after his passing, it was like a weight was lifted off Sarah's shoulders, and she completely changed. The only reason she had been considerate toward us was because of her husband's influence. Once he was gone, she had no reason to continue and started treating me like an outsider. With Mike, all she talked about was money, and that's how things have been ever since. John had actually been disowned after he ran away with his first wife. But once their father died, he was welcomed back, along with Linda. Even though this town offers a lot of support for raising children, raising 6 kids requires a lot of money. Mike often expressed his frustration at how naive they were about that.
This month's been tough. We could really use some financial help again.
What? Are you serious? How can you ask for money when Mike is going through something like this?
Stay out of it. This is family business.
Exactly.
I couldn't believe the audacity of Sarah and her family, and I yelled in frustration. But John just brushed it off. Linda stood beside him, smirking at me, even making a shooting gesture like she was waving off a dog.
Sorry, but we don't have the money to spare right now.
That's not going to work for us. We came all this way because we figured you'd have something for us. You're really such a useless son.
Sarah muttered under her breath, not even caring if Mike could hear or not. At this point, I was about to lose my temper with these 3, who clearly had no sense of decency.
So, how are you doing? What's the status of your cancer, and when will you get out?
It was obvious she wasn't asking out of concern. Knowing Sarah, she had some greedy plan in mind. She probably wanted to know because it had something to do with money.
I have 6 months left. I'll be discharged tomorrow, and I'll spend the rest of my time at home.
You're kidding.
The moment they heard that, Sarah and the others' eyes lit up. Instead of being shocked, they looked excited, like this was good news for them. It was a sickening sight, and I almost felt like I was going to throw up.
Well then, I'll come pick him up when you're discharged. You'll need a car, right?
No, thank you. Despite Mike's calm and polite response, Sarah and her crew continued to act inappropriately. I couldn't stand it any longer, so I forced the 3 of them out of the hospital room.
Hey, what do you think you're doing?
Leave. I'll handle everything on the discharge day, so there's no need for you to come. And I don't ever want to see your faces again.
What? Hey, don't you?
I slammed the door and locked it, cutting off whatever complaint Sarah was about to make. Immediately, I went to the hospital staff and explained the situation. I arranged with the nurse to restrict all visits except for me, making sure Sarah and the others wouldn't be able to see Mike again.
I'm sorry, Emily. I've caused you so much trouble.
Why didn't you stand up to them? They treat you like a fool and only care about you for your money. I was furious. How could such awful people keep living so freely while someone as good as Mike was the one who had to suffer? It might have been selfish to think that way, but I couldn't help it. I needed to let out my frustration. I didn't want to face the reality that Mike, someone I loved so deeply, was going to leave me.
I didn't want to put any extra strain on myself by arguing with them, but it made me happy that you stood up for me like that. That's why I have one last favor to ask you.
A favor? Then Mike entrusted me with something. What he told me was so shocking that I couldn't hide my surprise. But he was completely serious. Mike looked me in the eye and made sure I understood.
This will be the first and last thing I ever ask you.
I understand. With that, I took on the responsibility Mike entrusted to me, and that day I went home. The next day, before Sarah and the others could arrive, I quietly got Mike discharged. Though we were home, I knew Sarah would show up soon. I had to find a way to keep her and her family away from Mike. I made a slight change to Mike's original plan. Instead of staying at home, I arranged for us to stay at my friend's vacation house for a while.
I'll miss being at home a bit, but as long as I'm with you, it doesn't matter where we are.
Mike said with a shy smile, making me blush. After explaining the situation to my workplace, I took a long leave of absence. I wanted to spend every last moment by Mike's side. Thanks to the support of our friends, Mike was able to spend his remaining days in peace. 6 months later, he passed away quietly in his bed. At his funeral, Sarah and her family showed up. I braced myself for some kind of confrontation, but instead, they just smiled, looking at me with strange, almost creepy expressions. The sight of their grins sent a chill down my spine. What was that about? I soon found out exactly what their smiles meant. After the funeral, I returned home to start sorting through Mike's belongings. The doorbell rang, and when I opened it, there were Sarah and John standing at my doorstep, loaded with luggage.
We heard from the neighbors that you were finally back home.
What's with all that luggage? Sarah grumbled as she tried to push her way into the house. But I stood firm at the entrance, blocking her path. John glared at me, clearly annoyed.
What are you doing? Move out of the way.
I'm not moving. What's with all this luggage? And you brought your kids too. What exactly are you planning? Behind John, his entire family stood there. The situation was baffling, but I knew that panicking would only play into their hands. They were here with some scheme in mind. So I faced them with confidence. Then, with a mocking laugh, Sarah said something unbelievable.
Starting today, this house is ours. Get out, stranger.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sarah and her whole family, 9 of them, were trying to claim this house for themselves. I was so stunned by their absurdity that I couldn't even find words to respond.
It's only natural for my son's belongings to go to his blood relatives, right? Besides, I've got his will right here,
Sarah said, shoving the documents in my face. But instead of being intimidated, I burst into laughter, clutching my stomach. It was just too ridiculous. Sarah and her family looked so clueless. I couldn't stop laughing.
What's so funny?
Clearly offended by my reaction. Linda peeked out from behind John, glaring at me with annoyance. Still wiping away my tears of laughter, I delivered the shocking truth to them. You don't know, do you? This house is mine.
What? Huh?
Sarah and the others stared at me, utterly confused, their faces blank with disbelief. Their faces looked so ridiculously foolish that I almost burst out laughing again. But I held back my laughter and went to grab some documents from the room to reveal another fact. As you can see, this house legally belongs to me. Mike changed the ownership to my name while he was still alive.
What?
Sarah's eyes widened at the mention of a title transfer. She snatched the papers from my hands, and John and Linda crowded around her, examining them closely.
It's true. The house is in her name.
The documents were real, and my name was on the deed. Realizing that everything I said was the truth, John and Linda began shouting angrily. But I remained calm and continued speaking without a hint of fear.
This isn't fair. I thought the house was still under Mike's name.
We changed it when he got out of the hospital. Mike wanted to transfer ownership to me while he was still alive, so we wouldn't have any problems later on. Sarah, growing desperate, interrupted, thrusting her so-called will toward me.
That's impossible. I've got his will right here. Mike wrote this.
Sure enough, the paper had Mike's handwriting on it. However, it was just written in his handwriting with no signature or anything. There was no way it could function as a valid will like this. I sighed in exasperation at how ignorant and foolish Sarah and the others were. But no matter what I said, they weren't going to listen. Knowing what would happen next, I told them to wait for a moment while I made a phone call. Thank you for your help. Sorry to bother you, but Mike's family is here causing trouble over his will. Could you come by as soon as possible? Thanks.
Who were you just talking to?
Since I suddenly started making a phone call, John looked at me with a puzzled expression. Without offering much explanation, I told them to come inside. I led Sarah, John, and Linda to the sofa and instructed the kids to entertain themselves. Not long after, the doorbell rang, and I went to greet our guest. I invited him straight into the living room.
Sorry for the delay.
As the man in the suit stepped inside, John and the others immediately bristled with suspicion. They glared at him with hostile eyes. Not at all. I'm sorry for calling you on such short notice. This is Matthew, Mike's lawyer, who has been helping us with all the legal matters. I asked him to come because Sarah brought the will.
A lawyer.
The moment she realized who he was, Sarah let out a startled yelp. We were introduced to him through my friend, who had lent us a vacation home, and we explained the situation. Since he was a young lawyer, only 30 years old, both Mike and I were initially concerned. However, our friend told us he was quick-witted and very skilled at handling family disputes. After meeting Matthew in person, we were convinced. He was someone we could trust with this. We explained everything to Matthew, from Mike's estate to the conflict with his family, and he became our official legal representative. It was clear that Sarah and the others had no idea Mike had hired a lawyer. They looked completely stunned, like they hadn't been told anything. John and Linda were just as wide-eyed, speechless at the revelation.
Allow me to introduce myself again. I'm Matthew Jameson, Mike's attorney. I'm here to discuss some matters related to his estate. For the sake of transparency, I'll be recording this conversation as it will serve as evidence.
In contrast to John, who had long, messy hair and a flashy appearance, Matthew had neatly trimmed short hair. He wore glasses to soften his sharp gaze and had a very clean, professional look. Sarah, seemingly forgetting her position, gazed at Matthew with admiration. He bowed respectfully to her. Sarah, along with John and Linda, returned his gesture, suddenly very polite. When she saw his business card and lawyer's badge, Sarah straightened up, realizing he was indeed a real attorney. John and Linda also straightened their posture, looking tense and serious. I sat down on the sofa next to Matthew, and our conversation began. Matthew smoothly activated the voice recorder, and the discussion began.
Sarah, you mentioned you had a will. May I take a look at it?
Matthew asked calmly. His steady tone seemed to unsettle Sarah, whose hands trembled slightly as she handed over the document. They were probably thinking that without someone to back them up, they might not get their share of the inheritance. That thought must have crossed their minds. There was no way they could out-talk a professional lawyer. They seemed terribly anxious, worried that things might turn against them, but Matthew silently examined the will that Sarah had handed him. After reading it over, he glanced at me and gave a small nod.
Thank you. I'll return this to you now.
Matthew handed the will back to Sarah with a polite smile. Perhaps his demeanor made them even more uneasy as they began questioning whether the will was legitimate.
It was Mike's will, right?
Yes, this does appear to be Mike's will.
See? This means the house is ours now,
Sarah said, suddenly gaining confidence. But just as she was about to celebrate, Matthew cut her off, the older one, that is.
What?
Sarah's face scrunched up in confusion, as if she hadn't heard him correctly.
I said, this is indeed Mike's will, but it's an old one. The valid will is this one.
Matthew pulled out a newer document from his briefcase, dated after Sarah's version, and read it aloud.
All of my assets are to go to Emily. The previous will written for my mother is null and void, and this is my final will.
What?
Let me see that.
Linda and John quickly grabbed the new will from Matthew's hands to inspect it. The newer will had a fresh date, a signature, and even a fingerprint, and since it had been arranged through a lawyer, it was obvious which will was valid. As Linda and John grasped the situation, the color drained from their faces, and Sarah's lips trembled.
Then, this will
is just a worthless piece of paper.
What?
The moment the word worthless was spoken, John turned his anger toward Sarah. Even in front of my lawyer, he lashed out at her.
Hey, what's going on, you old hag? You told me the inheritance was ours and that you had it handled.
John was hurling words at Sarah, looking like he was about to grab her any second. Linda tried desperately to stop him, but there was no way she could match his strength. John shook Linda off and continued to shout insults at Sarah. She cowered in fear. It was a chaotic scene. I couldn't stand it any longer, so I glared at John and calmly spoke. Would you mind not causing a scene in my house? You're being a real nuisance.
What did you say?
If you keep acting like this, we'll have Matthew here document everything and take it to court. The moment I mentioned Matthew's name, John stopped dead in his tracks. He knew he couldn't win against a lawyer. Being completely ignorant of the law, he realized there was no way he could win, so he hurriedly sat down on the couch. By the way, did Mike willingly write that will? Once things had calmed down a bit, I turned to Sarah with a question. It was clearly his handwriting, so it was only natural to think so. Though she seemed to be expecting me to agree, I stayed silent and waited for her response.
Yes, of course. Mike wrote it for me when he was in the hospital.
Really? Mike willingly wrote that for you?
That's what Sarah's been saying all along. What's your problem?
It must have felt like an interrogation, which clearly irritated her. Linda cut in abruptly from the side. Sarah nodded in agreement with her, and I glanced over at Matthew. He adjusted his glasses and gave me a subtle nod. That was the okay sign from Matthew, and once I got the signal, I revealed a certain truth to Sarah and the others. It's strange, because the hospital security footage shows you forcing Mike to write that will. I pulled a laptop from my bag and inserted my USB drive containing the data the hospital had provided. When I had first contacted Matthew, Mike had told him that he'd been coerced into writing the will. We explained this to the hospital, and they were willing to cooperate by providing the security footage. I quickly downloaded the data and displayed the footage on the screen.
We can't risk you dying and us not getting the inheritance.
The footage showed Sarah, John, and even Linda pressuring Mike to write the will, using what were practically threats.
If you don't want that woman to suffer, you better just write the will quietly.
Yeah, Mike. As long as you do this, nothing bad will happen to her.
The footage was from 3 days before Mike was discharged. Sarah and the others had asked Mike about the progression of his cancer as part of their plan. Their twisted intention was clearly to get their hands on the inheritance as soon as possible.
That's not true. We were just joking around.
Exactly. We were watching some TV show before going to the hospital, and the villain was so cool we were just copying him.
Come on, we weren't serious. Can't you cut us some slack?
Now that they knew they were in trouble, the three of them scrambled to make excuses. But their desperate words only fueled my anger. I could only sigh in exasperation at their pitiful attempts to cover up the truth. Not only do you refuse to admit what you've done, but you're actively trying to hide it. This is deliberate. Matthew, can we charge them with extortion as well?
Absolutely. And we've got it all recorded.
Matthew said with a broad smile as he picked up the voice recorder. John, Sarah, and Linda's faces turned pale as they realized they had completely forgotten about the recording. They were speechless, their mouths opening and closing without a sound. Given all this, I'll be making sure to file a claim for damages against each of you for what you've done to him.
What?
No, wait. Please, Emily, it was all Sarah's idea. We were just standing by. I never told him to write anything.
Linda frantically tried to distance herself from responsibility. Her words triggered a new argument between Sarah and John.
You all agreed to pressure him into writing the will.
You're the one who said you could handle it, Mom. We didn't do anything but stand by.
You were threatening Mike to hurry up and sign it.
That's because Mike's appointment was coming up. It wasn't about the will. We were just running out of time. If we waited too long, Emily could have shown up.
So, they had intentionally waited for a moment when I wasn't there. Linda unknowingly provided more incriminating testimony, but she was too caught up in the argument to realize it. The three of them continued their ugly dispute, and their children, who had been playing in the other room, eventually came over, curious after overhearing the argument. Some of them were as young as 2. I could see the fear in their eyes. The children were innocent. I understood that much. I quickly called over my oldest nephew, a 5th grader, and told him to take his siblings to another room, away from the adults' ugly dispute. Not fully understanding what was going on, he followed instructions and moved to another room, bringing his younger siblings with him. Once they were out of sight, I turned back to the 3 adults and said coldly, "Aren't you ashamed of yourselves? You call yourselves parents?"
What did you say?
You're standing here, blaming each other and arguing like children, right in front of your own kids. Don't you feel any shame? Passing the blame back and forth. It's pathetic. Linda, realizing what I'd said, glanced toward the door where the children had exited. Remembering how the children had left the room looking anxious, she came over to me, bowed her head deeply, and apologized. She pleaded desperately for forgiveness.
I'm so sorry. I admit everything, forcing the will, everything we did. Please forgive us.
John and Sarah, desperate to salvage the situation, quickly followed her lead, offering their own apologies.
We've got to provide for our kids. Please, just don't take away the money.
If I have to pay damages, I don't know how I'll survive. Please, we'll make amends for what we did, but don't make it any harder.
They were crying now, pleading for mercy. But their words only made me angrier. In the end, all you care about is your money, your livelihood. You don't feel the slightest bit sorry.
That's not.
We're just struggling, and we wanted you to understand.
Do you know what that's called? It's called an excuse. John flinched as though struck by my words. Sarah and Linda had clearly been thinking the same. They were scrambling to apologize, though I wasn't about to let them off the hook. Before they could speak, I cut them off. It doesn't matter how many times you apologize. I'm not forgiving you. If you're worried about your children, then you'll have to work harder to make things right. If you hadn't done this to Mike in the first place, none of this would be happening. It's all your fault, so why should I have to forgive you? Doesn't that sound ridiculous to you? Their silence was enough. Now that you understand, leave. This house is full of precious memories, and I have no intention of sharing it with any of you.
Please, Emily, forgive us.
We were wrong.
Please, Emily, I beg you.
They desperately pleaded for forgiveness, but I coldly told them that if they said any more, I'd call the police. Realizing that getting the police involved would be a disaster. The three of them hurriedly gathered their children and belongings and left my house. Matthew and I watched them go, our eyes cold and unyielding. Once they were gone, we quickly locked the door behind them. Finally, it was over, and together with Matthew, I let out a sigh of relief. After that, I immediately asked Matthew to proceed with the process of filing the claim for damages. He had already prepared everything, so the process went smoothly. We filed a claim against the three of them for extorting Mike to write the will, totaling $30,000. When they realized they couldn't afford to pay, they tried to negotiate, but I refused to compromise. You'll pay every penny. Since I didn't agree to any deals, their lives took a drastic turn. Sarah now had to take care of all 6 grandkids on her own, from morning until night. John and Linda worked nonstop, struggling to make ends meet. They sold their house and moved into a cramped apartment with all 9 of them. They did manage to pay off the damages, but their financial situation remained dire, and it looked like that lifestyle would continue until their youngest child turned 18. In the end, I successfully severed ties with them for good. Even after sorting through Mike's belongings, I continued to live in our house. I kept working, and sometimes my coworkers would visit, so I never felt too lonely. Hey, guess what happened today? Every day, I would look at Mike's photo and tell him about my day. You made me a promise, remember? Even if I get weak and end up in the hospital, I'll keep talking to you every day. That day, Mike made one last request to me. It was to speak to him every day.
I love talking to you, and I love the sound of your voice. So, even after I'm gone, keep talking to me like I'm still here.
Those were Mike's last words before he passed away. And so, every day, until the day I join him, I'll keep that promise.
My sister comes first, not my wife.
A wedding is supposed to be an irreplaceable moment for a couple. The wedding cake cutting ceremony, often described as the couple's first joint task, was supposed to be done by Harrison and me. However, at that moment, Harrison pushed me aside and called out to May.
Here, hold the knife.
Wait, really? Yay! The cake cutting that was supposed to be ours. Instead, right in front of me, Harrison and May were happily carrying out the task. I knew that Harrison adored May. But there are things that are acceptable and things that aren't. I've put up with it until now, but this is the last straw. I don't care if people think I'm being selfish anymore. The wedding is canceled. I demanded that the wedding be called off. My name is Lauren Adams, 27 years old, single. I live with my parents and work at a design company. I'm happy to lead a very peaceful life, thanks to the support of my loving parents and coworkers. I did have a husband. His name was Harrison Collins. Harrison and I met back in high school. I was about to start a new life without any friends. I worried endlessly about what I'd do if I didn't make a single friend. Some nights, I couldn't even sleep before the first day of high school. On the first day, I headed to school with a lot of determination. I was nervous at first, but once I entered the classroom and took my seat, the tension strangely disappeared. I took a deep breath and looked around the room. Maybe things would work out better than I thought. This idea lifted my spirits even more. After school, I went back home, my thoughts filled with anticipation for my high school life. What club should I join? Which elective classes should I take? There were so many things to look forward to that only come with a new school year. A month passed, and I successfully made friends and joined a club. It seemed like I could keep up with my studies. One day, during my quite ordinary high school life, I became friends with a boy. That boy was Harrison. Harrison and I were in the same class and the same club, so we knew of each other, but that was about it. We had never actually talked. However, one day, we found ourselves alone together. As I walked toward the school gate to wait for my mom to pick me up, there was Harrison. No one else was around, and the sound of the trees swaying in the winds was all I could hear. Just when I was thinking this felt a bit awkward and was about to take out my phone.
Well, what's the first period tomorrow again?
Harrison's voice broke the silence. What was it? Math.
Oh, right. Math. Thanks.
I was surprised that Harrison spoke to me, but it didn't make me feel bad at all. In fact, I wondered if this could be my chance to get closer to him. Are you good at math?
Not really. Actually, I'm not really good at studying in general.
Really? That's kind of surprising. Even though I didn't know much about Harrison, I couldn't help but blurt out that I found it surprising.
Surprising?
Oh, sorry. I just thought you seemed like someone who would be good at studying.
What the heck? You think I look like a studious person just from my vibe? Well, you look like you'd be good at studying, you know?
Really? Do I? Harrison laughed at my words. For some reason, that made me really happy. This conversation brought us closer. We started talking more in class and hanging out during club activities. Since Harrison wasn't good at studying, I even started helping him out during breaks and after school. Harrison was actually worse at studying than I had imagined. But when I explained things step by step, he understood them well, so it was rewarding to teach him. I even started to enjoy studying with him. Because of this, our classmates and club members often teased us. Harrison would deny it, but his face would turn a little red, making him look embarrassed. Oddly enough, it didn't bother me either. A year passed, and we became sophomores in high school. When the new school year started and things settled down with both studies and club activities, Harrison confessed to me.
I've liked you for a long time.
Hearing his words made me happy. At the same time, I realized that I had liked him all along too. I've liked you too. Harrison looked relieved when he heard my response. He leaned back in his chair and muttered, "Thank goodness." And so we started dating. What kind of scenery would we get to see together in the future? I didn't want to think about how long we'd be together. I just hoped we could stay together forever. From that point on, our relationship naturally became even closer. We not only talked in class and went to club activities together, but also started going to and from school as a pair. On weekends, we started going on dates and even began visiting each other's homes. Harrison's house was a luxurious single-family home. Since it was my boyfriend's house, I always felt nervous, no matter how many times I visited. "You don't have to be so nervous," Harrison would say with a laugh. 6 months had passed since Harrison and I started dating. One day, after finishing our usual date, we headed to his house. When we walked into the living room, there was a girl I didn't recognize. However, I quickly realized who she was. It was his sister. Harrison had mentioned before that he had a sister, but this was the first time I had actually met her.
Oh, May, aren't you hanging out with your friends today?
Big bro. No, they're all busy.
The girl, who Harrison called May, beamed with joy and threw herself into Harrison's arms. He caught her and laughed. Watching them, I found it heartwarming to see such a close-knit sibling relationship. Then, May glanced at me.
Who's this? Oh, is she your girlfriend, Harrison?
Well, yeah, she is. This is Lauren.
He was probably embarrassed to introduce me as his girlfriend, and his face turned red as he did. When May heard my name, she smiled just as happily as when she hugged Harrison and started to introduce herself.
I'm May, his sister. Nice to meet you.
May, thank you. It's nice to meet you too. While May and I were talking, Harrison watched us with gentle eyes. Afterward, Harrison and I went up to his room. May is really cute.
Right? She is so adorable and hardworking. I'm so proud of her.
Harrison leaned forward and started passionately talking about May. May was 3 years younger than us. She was cute, diligent, and unlike him, a good student. Most of the time, she spent her afternoons and weekends in club activities or hanging out with her friends, so it seemed she was usually not around when I visited Harrison's house. In any case, Harrison and May were very close. That's the impression I got from listening to his enthusiastic praise. You two really are close.
Yeah, we are.
Back then, I didn't feel any discomfort about the dynamic between Harrison and May. I just thought they were an adorably close pair of siblings. But there was one event that happened that stuck with me a little bit. It was about a month after I first met May. I was fiddling with my phone in Harrison's room when there was a knock on the door.
Come in.
Responding to Harrison's voice, May walked in. In her hands, she was carrying a tray.
I brought juice and snacks.
She placed glasses of apple juice in front of us and then sat down herself. Thank you.
No problem. Drink up.
On the day we first met, as I was leaving, I had some time to chat with May, which brought us closer. We decided to drop the formalities and speak to each other more like friends. May was very friendly and easy to get along with. Just like I enjoyed talking with May, I hope she also found it fun to talk with me. As the three of us chatted about random things, I suddenly realized that an hour had flown by. And I wasn't the only one who noticed it.
What? It's already this late.
Wow. We really have been talking for a while.
Harrison and May looked at each other and laughed. The next moment, Harrison pulled May close and wrapped her in his arms. I knew they were close siblings, and I was aware they often showed physical affection. But this time, I was taken aback. The way they interacted didn't seem like just the usual sibling bond. It looked more like something between a couple.
May.
Hey, Harrison, stop it. That tickles.
Harrison buried his face into May's neck. Though she told him to stop because it tickled, her tone didn't sound like she was annoyed. In fact, it sounded more like she was happy. I couldn't help but ask, "Wow, you two are really close." Right after asking, I felt a little regret, wondering if I had overstepped. But neither of them seemed bothered. In fact, they looked happy that I had called them close. Watching this scene, I couldn't help but feel a sense of discomfort. Is this normal for siblings to be this close? Being an only child, I didn't know what a typical sibling relationship was like. So, all I could do was quietly watch as they continued their displays of affection. Even after that, the dynamic between Harrison and May didn't change. I found myself witnessing more moments of them being physically close. As we continued living this way, before I knew it, the time came for Harrison and me to head off to college. We hadn't planned it or discussed it, but we ended up going to the same university, though in different departments. We both started living on our own, which meant we spent even more time together. On weekends, we'd go out on dates, but most of the time, we'd stay at one of our places, doing homework or watching movies. Since starting college, I hadn't seen May. Have you seen May lately? Is she doing well? Sometimes I'd bring up May in our conversations. I was genuinely curious about how she was doing. And without fail, Harrison would always eagerly start talking about her.
You know, May has been getting even cuter lately. I mean, she was always cute, but now she's like even cuter. Oh, right. Look at this. Here, this is a recent photo of May. She's just so adorable.
Harrison would pull out his phone from his pocket and show me a picture of May. She's so cute.
Right. And then,
When I commented on how cute May was, Harrison would show me countless photos from his phone's gallery. May was undeniably cute. But still, something about it always nagged at me. The way Harrison treated May and me was just too different. I knew Harrison adored May, and it made sense that he spoke kindly about her. However, when it came to me, his girlfriend, he was quite reserved. I had never been complimented as much as May or even called cute by him. I understood that his feelings for his sister and for me were different, and I could see that from his usual behavior. But being his girlfriend, I couldn't help but wish he'd compliment me a bit more. Honestly, if you asked me if I was jealous, I couldn't deny it. That's how much I questioned the nature of Harrison and May's relationship. Of course, I couldn't voice my concerns to Harrison, so all I could do was quietly listen to him talk. Around half a year had passed since we started college. One day, as usual, I went over to Harrison's place. "Hello. Whose shoes are these?"
oh, May's here today.
Wow, May's here? Up until now, May had never been home when I visited. Confused, I followed Harrison into the living room, where May was lying on the sofa, playing with her phone. Next to her was a branded bag that seemed quite pricey for her age. Around her neck and ears were accessories with brand logos that also seemed far too luxurious for someone her age.
Oh, Lauren, long time no see.
Hey, long time no see.
Wait, didn't he tell you I was coming over?
No, I thought it'd be a fun surprise. You know, since she liked May, I thought she'd be shocked to find May here without any heads up.
Harrison said proudly while May beamed with joy.
Really? Lauren?
Yeah, I was surprised, but it's nice.
Yeah.
May, who had gotten up to talk to me, sank back into the sofa again. Normally, Harrison would sit next to me, but this time he sat close to May. I sat down alone on the carpet.
Harrison, it's been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been 2 weeks, right?
If 2 weeks is a while, then how often do they usually meet? I watched them, holding hands like a couple, sharing their affectionate moment. Even after that, the two of them continued to immerse themselves in their own world, not paying much attention to me. I couldn't find an opening to join in and felt out of place. We had planned to watch a movie together today, just the two of us, but it didn't seem possible now. I didn't want to interfere with Harrison and May, so I quietly worked on my college assignments. Before I knew it, 2 hours had passed since I arrived. I was nearly done with my work. As always, they were completely absorbed in their own world. I could hear them showing physical affection and chatting about trivial things. You two really are close, right? I said it with a hint of sarcasm, but it went right over their heads.
Right.
Yeah, we're super close.
They got even more excited and exchanged glances. I regretted saying anything, realizing that I needed to be more direct. A few days later, during some alone time with Harrison, I decided to express my feelings. Hey, about May.
May? Do you want to see her again? If that's the case.
No, it's just, I think it's great that you two are so close, but maybe you could spend a little more time with me? Harrison widened his eyes in surprise at my words, but he quickly laughed it off like he usually did.
What? Are you jealous?
It's not exactly jealousy, but
May and I are just siblings, you know. We're not doing anything weird. You shouldn't let it bother you.
Harrison brushed off my concerns as if they were nothing, laughing as if it was all a joke. Despite this conversation, his overly close interactions with May continued. It became normal for her to be around when Harrison and I were together. Even though I was right there, they'd still drift into their own world, showing each other affection. I don't mind you being close with May, but could you maybe do that when I'm not around? Even when I said this, Harrison didn't listen at all.
Oh, come on. Is it that big deal? Like I said before, May and I are siblings. It's just how we are. You're being dramatic.
Harrison didn't take my words seriously, laughing at me like I was overreacting. Honestly, I often thought about breaking up with him, but I never went through with it. The main reason was that I didn't have the energy or desire to start a new relationship from scratch. If I had ended things the moment I felt something was off, it wouldn't have turned into such a big issue. Looking back now, I feel frustrated with my past self. As time passed, we graduated from college and entered the workforce. There were many things I felt about Harrison, but my feelings for him hadn't changed. Also, since we became working adults, it seemed like Harrison and May's interactions had lessened. Did he finally realize how much it bothered me? Or was he just too busy with work? I didn't know what he truly felt, but I chose to believe it was because he understood my feelings. I started to think that he finally got it. Then, 5 years after we started working, Harrison proposed to me.
I promise I'll make you happy.
Harrison looked at me with a serious expression and shared his feelings. Now that I think about it, my actions were strange. But back then, I still loved Harrison. Yes, we both support each other. I accepted Harrison's proposal. We decided to build a happy life together. After that, we registered our marriage. We rented a small apartment and started our new life together. However, with this change, Harrison resumed his interactions with May. More often than not, I would come home to find May there, turning what was supposed to be a life for just the two of us into one shared with her.
Lauren, what's for dinner tonight?
Wait, are you eating with us again?
Of course, I've been eating here every day lately.
May, acting like it was the most natural thing, joined us at the table. Honestly, it didn't make me feel great. Naturally, I couldn't directly ask May to stop coming over, so I turned to Harrison for help. But his response was always the same.
Well, it's only until our wedding. Just bear with it until then.
Apparently, Harrison wanted me to allow his interactions with May until the wedding was over. I could accept that, but given everything that had happened up to now, I couldn't just believe it. In reality, Harrison and May's behavior was outrageous. Harrison would cancel our dates to go out with May without hesitation. He continued to spoil her, buying her branded accessories and cosmetics. May didn't seem to mind at all. But this was just something to endure until the wedding was over. I couldn't fully trust him, but still, I wanted to believe in him. However, one day, something happened that pushed me beyond my limits. It happened during our wedding. We had spent so much time planning it, making sure it was something we both were happy with. I had been really looking forward to it. Harrison also seemed to be looking forward to the wedding. A lot had happened, but Harrison did love me. That's why we were together now. Thinking about that made my heart fill with joy. The ceremony went off without a hitch, and the reception began. As the reception proceeded under the MC's guidance, it was time for the cake cutting. We were handed the knife by the staff and began walking toward the wedding cake. But at that moment, Harrison pushed me aside and called May over.
Here, hold the knife.
Wait, really? Yay.
May was surprised at first, but quickly understood the situation and ran over. The cake cutting that Harrison and I were supposed to do together. But there in front of me were Harrison and May, working together with happy faces. Wait, hold on. As I hesitantly spoke up, Harrison said something shocking with a laugh.
My sister takes priority over my wife.
I knew that Harrison was obsessed with May. But still, didn't he understand there are things you just shouldn't do? The moment I heard those words, something inside me shattered. I had put up with it all this time, but this was my breaking point. I didn't care if people thought I was being selfish anymore. The wedding is off. I demanded the cancellation of the wedding.
What?
A voice filled with confusion rose up, but I didn't pay it any mind. I asked the venue staff to arrange for the guests to leave immediately. As the guests were leaving, I apologized to each one of them. I felt terribly guilty for making these people, who had taken the time to attend, leave like this. When I realized it, I saw that my relatives, except for Harrison and May, were standing beside me, bowing their heads. With the guests gone, only the relatives and a few staff members remained in the venue. The room was filled with an indescribable tension. Some people appeared confused, while others seemed visibly angry. However, it was my dad who broke the silence.
What is going on? Hey, you. What kind of nonsense was that?
Well,
Well, nothing. Why did you call your sister up there? Don't you understand how inappropriate that was? Can't you even imagine how Lauren felt watching that scene?
Exactly. The wedding was supposed to be about you and Lauren. Don't you know there are things you just can't do? That was just the worst.
Harrison was scolded harshly by my parents and fell silent. Next to him, May looked down, clearly feeling uncomfortable. However, my mother-in-law quickly spoke up.
Hey, you two. Don't just stand there. Say something. You ruined the wedding and now you're just gonna stay quiet. Don't you realize how messed up this was?
sorry.
We're sorry.
Harrison and May muttered their apologies, but they didn't look genuinely remorseful. In fact, May looked like she wanted to say she didn't do anything wrong.
What exactly are you sorry for? What are you apologizing for? You need to make that clear.
I usually make an effort not to raise my voice. Seeing me visibly angry must have shocked them. But there was no way I could calm down. If anything, after everything I'd put up with, this was the least I deserved.
Come on, speak up. Don't you get it?
I'm sorry for calling May up there.
Up there? Where exactly? Be specific.
At the cake cutting.
Harrison answered in a muttered voice, looking down. He apologized, but of course, I had no intention of forgiving him.
Hey, May, don't you have anything to say? Why did you go up there?
Well, because I was called. But am I really at fault?
Sure, it started with Harrison, but you going up there is on you. Don't you get it?
May fell completely silent after hearing my father-in-law's words. Sulking, it was clear that expecting anything more from her was pointless. Didn't you realize how low it is to pull something like this at a wedding? I knew you two were close, but I thought you'd at least show some restraint at the wedding.
But I thought this would be my last chance to make May happy.
What? That's why you did that? Isn't that incredibly selfish? You know what?
Marrying you was a mistake. Let's get a divorce.
Marrying Harrison was a mistake. That was my honest feeling. I decided that talking with Harrison here wouldn't get us anywhere, so I started getting ready to leave. Some people were shocked by the word divorce, but no one tried to stop me. They must have understood after seeing Harrison's actions. I apologized to the staff and everyone involved and headed to the dressing room. Then I packed my things, got into my dad's car, and went back to my parents' house. I couldn't stay married to Harrison any longer. After seeing his actions, I was certain of that. While packing my things at home, and even after arriving at my parents' house, Harrison came after me, begging to reconcile. I couldn't imagine anyone at the wedding urging him to chase after me. He must have forced his way here, ignoring his relative attempts to stop him.
Come on, don't talk about divorce. Please, we just got married. I'm begging you, can't you reconsider?
I can't reconsider. It's over.
So suddenly.
Suddenly? Don't you remember how many times I've asked you to stop doing things like this? It was always about May. I really don't get it. Harrison seemed like he had more to say, his mouth moving as if searching for words. But I wasn't about to wait for him to explain himself. Just go. I'll contact you about what happens next.
Hey,
If you come back here without my permission, I'll call the police.
Got it.
Now get out. I forcibly pushed Harrison out and shut the door. What do I need to do next? As the exhaustion set in, the more I thought about it, the more my head hurt. But I wasn't alone. I had my parents. I figured it was okay to rely on them, at least in a situation like this. So I started unpacking. 2 weeks later, I called Harrison and May over to my parents' house. Harrison looked smaller than the last time I'd seen him. In contrast, May was still sulking, her expression unchanged.
I'm truly sorry.
The moment Harrison entered the living room, he apologized to me and my parents. He seemed remorseful, but I couldn't tell if it was genuine. It's good that you can apologize, but I'm not forgiving you. Now, sit down.
Okay.
When I gestured for them to sit, they reluctantly took a seat on the sofa. I said this before, but I want a divorce. I won't ask for any money from you, but I do want you to pay the cancellation fee for the wedding.
What? Why?
Hearing his words made it clear he wasn't genuinely sorry. Why? Do I have to explain everything from the beginning?
But you're the one who told them to cancel the wedding.
Don't you get that it started with you? If you hadn't pulled that stunt, we wouldn't be here. I told you this before. If you truly understood, you should at least agree to cover the cancellation fee.
I understand that, but still.
Harrison looked like he hadn't expected me to bring up money at all. Judging by his reaction, it wouldn't have been surprising if he thought I would pay the cancellation fee myself. But what? If you can justify this situation, you've got some nerve.
I know I was wrong, but isn't it a bit much to expect me to pay the whole cancellation fee? I mean, even if it was my fault, shouldn't we at least split it?
Can you really say that after admitting you were at fault? If I had done the same to you, what would you have done? You probably expect me to cover the entire cancellation fee, wouldn't you? How many times did I ask you to reconsider your relationship with May? This situation is a result of you going too far. Isn't that right? Anger boiled inside me, and I let it all out. If I didn't do this, Harrison would never change his mind. It's not about the money. If you were truly remorseful, you'd be able to handle this much. It's about the principle. If you think I'm being greedy, then you're not really sorry. At that moment, my dad, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up.
Harrison, I hear you've been buying your sister expensive bags and accessories. Why is it that you can spend money on her, but not on Lauren? Sure, you could argue it's a different matter, but it seems pretty convenient for you.
If you love May so much, maybe you should have just married her. No matter how many times I said I wanted time alone with you, you never listened. You always said it couldn't be helped because she's your sister. Things got better for a while, but after we got married, it went back to the way it was.
That's...
You kept saying I just needed to hang in there until the wedding was over. You even canceled our plans together. Now, you're okay with the divorce, but you're throwing a tantrum over the cancellation fee? How funny. It's strange that he wouldn't object to ending our marriage, but would object to paying the cancellation fee. Whether my words and my dad's finally reached him, or if he just wanted to end the conversation, Harrison slumped and spoke.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll pay, and I'll agree to the divorce.
So, you finally get it after all this. Now, sign the divorce papers. I've also prepared a document about the cancellation fee since money is involved. Sign that as well. Reluctantly, Harrison signed the divorce papers and the documents regarding the cancellation fee. As usual, May sat beside him, sulking and picking at her nails. If you ask why I called May here today, honestly, I don't have a reason. But since she was involved in the whole mess, I thought maybe I'd get her to say something.
May, don't you have anything to say?
What? You want me to apologize? I don't get it.
That's not exactly what I meant.
The expression on her face wasn't the sweet and innocent look I once knew.
Besides,
In the next moment, May revealed an unexpected truth.
this whole thing is a bother to me. And just so you know, I don't even like Harrison.
What? May, who had always been so attached to Harrison, actually didn't like him? Everyone in the room was shocked. But the one most surprised was Harrison himself.
What?
He's honestly gross. It was fine when we were kids, but by the time I was in high school, it got really cringy.
Then why did you always act like that?
In response to Harrison's question, May dropped another bombshell.
Because he gave me money.
What?
Not just that he gave me money. Whenever I pretended to be a sweet, affectionate sister, he'd buy me anything I wanted. Once, I even asked for something I thought he'd never buy, but he got it for me without a second thought. I was totally creeped out, like, wow, does he like me that much?
It seemed May had quite a few thoughts about Harrison. She went on, airing her grievances about him without stopping.
I hated everything about you. From asking me to go out with you to always clinging to me, it was all so annoying and gross. You should really act your age, you know? And having a wife but acting the same as before? That's seriously messed up. Oh wait, you had a wife. I guess had is more accurate since you're getting divorced now.
Then why were you always so clingy with me?
I told you, because you'd buy me whatever I wanted. Did you seriously think I actually liked you? You even tried to make me happy with that cake thing at my wedding, but honestly, it was a total nuisance. Now, everyone thinks I'm at fault too. Could you stop dragging me into your self-serving acts?
I no longer wanted an apology from May. Her words were too shocking.
Wait, are you serious?
You think I'm lying at this point? Get real.
May's laughter echoed through the house. When I looked at Harrison, he was crushed by despair. The shock left an indescribable silence in the room, and no one could find the words to speak. However, my mom broke the silence.
It's clear you might have disliked Harrison, but let me ask you, was there ever a time when he forced you to do something?
What are you talking about?
It's obvious you were using him for money, but still, you should know your place a bit. That includes the wedding. Yes, it's true Harrison called you up there, but you had the choice not to go. You decided to put your desires first. Harrison was definitely the most out of line, but you were pretty out of line too, weren't you?
May scowled in frustration.
Are you lecturing me?
Do you have any idea how angry it makes me to see my daughter's wedding ruined and then see you act like you did nothing wrong? Clearly, you don't.
What did you just say, you old hag? I've been listening to your crap for too long.
May lost her temper, yelling at my mom. But my mom wasn't about to back down. May's behavior could be seen as nothing but a tantrum. After everything that happened, acting like she was blameless was just too much. Then Harrison spoke up.
May, please stop.
What?
I was wrong. No, we were wrong.
We? Why am I included in this?
I bet he didn't want to lecture her either. But after hearing what May said, maybe he realized he couldn't keep spoiling her forever.
Lauren, can May and I pay for the cancellation fee?
What?
Of course, it's not because I want to lessen my own burden. If you want, I'll cover it all myself. But like your mom said, both May and I are at fault for what happened at the wedding. We need to take responsibility.
Hey, don't decide that without asking me.
Harrison stopped May, who was starting to protest. His eyes were no longer those of a brother who idolized his sister.
May, it's time to grow up. Not that I'm one to talk, but if Lauren and her parents are okay with it, I think it's what we should do. Listening to what you said, I realize I've spoiled you way too much.
Does it really take things getting this bad for you to see the truth?
I'm truly sorry.
Fine. That'll work. May's face twisted in anger.
This is the worst. There's no way I'm paying.
How long are you going to keep this up? I'm telling Dad and the rest of the family about everything that happened today, including how you talked back to Mom. The decision is final, so you better start accepting it.
Seriously, what is this?
Until the very end, May kept throwing a tantrum. However, as the conversation went on, she seemed to realize that no matter how much she argued, things wouldn't go her way. By the time the discussion ended, she had finally quieted down. After that, my divorce from Harrison was finalized. As discussed, Harrison and May covered the cancellation fee for the wedding. Harrison told me that after our talk, May cut off all contact with him. In the end, Harrison lost everything: his wife, his money, and the sister he once idolized. And so, this ordeal came to a close. Maybe feeling abandoned by May, Harrison began to send me more messages after the divorce. The content varied, from updates on his life to pleas for reconciliation. But at this point, his desperate attempts didn't change my feelings at all. When I continued to ignore him, he eventually gave up and the messages stopped coming. A year has passed since then, and I am now living at my parents' house and focusing on my work. Despite everything that happened, the colleagues I had invited to my wedding have not changed their attitude toward me, which has been a great comfort. While I'd like to forget that dreadful incident entirely, I know it's something so shocking that it will stay with me forever. I do have some regrets. If only I had been more cautious and hadn't been so naive. But what's done is done. All I can do now is keep looking forward and move on. Today, as always, I'm grateful for the support of those around me, and I intend to live my life from here on without any more regrets.
Shut up. If you've got complaints, then get out. Seeing a loser like you just pisses me off. You're an eyesore.
Suddenly, Kevin grabbed the picture of my late mom that was displayed in my room and threw it to the floor with all his might. This had gone way too far, and I finally snapped. Kevin, enough is enough. It was my cherished photo, something I had held dear for years. The plastic frame of the photo stand was broken into a miserable shape. What did I ever do to deserve this? Why do I have to endure such treatment? I had reached my limit. Fine, I'll leave. I can't stay here anymore. I want to leave right now. That was how I honestly felt.
Finally ready to leave? Make sure you take everything and don't leave a trace. And don't ever come back.
Fine, I'll leave just like you wanted. You'll regret it. The next day, even though I had left just as Kevin wanted, I received an unexpected call from him. Over the phone, his voice was shaking with agitation. That's right. Kevin had been clueless until now. When I revealed an important secret to him, he started trembling uncontrollably, almost comically. My name is Jessica. Right after I graduated from high school, I joined a local internet advertising company. However, the video editing work that I had originally been doing as a side job took off, and now at 30, I've gone independent as a freelance video editor. I lost my mom in an accident when I was young. The sudden loss of my mom was a really tough experience for me as a child. After my mom passed away, it was just me and my dad. I was still in elementary school at the time, so my dad and I worked together to take care of things around the house. My dad got really busy with his work after my mom died, so he didn't have much time for me. Since my grandparents had passed away early on, there wasn't really anyone around I could depend on, and I wasn't allowed to rely on anyone or be coddled. I had no choice but to fend for myself. Growing up, I sometimes found myself jealous of my friends who had a different life than mine. After my mom passed away, there were nights when I cried alone in my pillow. Although I had a lonely childhood, I was fortunate to have good friends, and my school days were busy but full of fun. After graduating from high school, I got a job at a local company and entered the working world. Then one day, out of the blue, my dad told me he was getting remarried. The woman he introduced me to was much younger than him and quite flashy. She was nothing like my late mom. She didn't dress like a typical mom and had a strong, overwhelming perfume. Even though there had been signs of women in my dad's life before, he had never introduced any of them to me. Maybe he thought now that I was an adult, his parenting duties were over, and he was ready to start a new chapter. The woman he was remarrying had also been married before and had a son. Her son, Kevin, was 9 years younger than me and still a student. Even though I had some worries about having a younger stepbrother, deep down, I was kind of excited about having a new family after so many years of it just being my dad and me.
Jessica, I'm looking forward to getting to know you.
Sarah, my dad's new wife, spoke to me with a slightly stiff expression that looked like a forced smile. I figured they must have met at one of the pubs my dad often went to. To be honest, I thought my dad had terrible taste in women. Kevin, her son, just glared at me and didn't say a word. At the time, I brushed it off, thinking it was just teenage moodiness. And so, our life as a family of 4 began. Not long after my mom passed away, my dad stopped doing housework altogether, and from that point on, I handled all the chores by myself. When he got remarried, I hoped that my workload at home might ease up a bit, but those hopes were quickly shattered. Sarah didn't do any housework at all, and instead of cooking for just the 2 of us, I now had to prepare meals for double the number of people, increasing my burden. Sarah would stay out late every night and often didn't come home until morning, so I barely saw her. At that time, I had just started freelancing, and although I worked from home, I had a heavy workload, which made it even harder to balance work and housework. Meanwhile, from the very beginning of their marriage, my dad and Sarah fought constantly, and their relationship was far from smooth. I often heard their arguments echoing through the house. Everyone could see it wasn't going to work out, and sure enough, just a few months after they got married, Sarah packed up and left. She didn't just leave my dad. She walked out on her own son, Kevin, as well. Normally, this would be unthinkable, but for her, it wasn't surprising at all. Kevin didn't seem too shocked that his mom had left either. Maybe their relationship had always been strained. He never seemed particularly close to her. It's possible that Sarah had planned to leave him behind from the start. Kevin probably understood the kind of person his mom was better than we did. But now, Kevin was facing college entrance, and it was a time when he needed financial support more than ever. We couldn't let him give up on his college dreams because of his mom. So my dad and I decided that we'd cover all of Kevin's education and living expenses and continue living as the three of us. Despite all the challenges, Kevin successfully became a college student. When he got accepted into his school of choice, I was relieved. Once in college, Kevin started talking to me a bit more. Until then, he had never tried to open up or initiate any conversation. But after entering college, he became a little more sociable. However, Kevin's attitude toward me was different. He started acting condescending, looking down on me whenever we interacted. He probably thought I was some kind of jobless freeloader, living off my dad at my age. I tried explaining my work to him several times, but Kevin wasn't interested in listening.
Still at home? Well, I guess someone with just a high school diploma at your age wouldn't be able to find a job. How sad.
Every time he saw me at home, Kevin would criticize me like that. In reality, while I was working, I was also cooking his meals, doing his laundry, and managing everything in the houses. So his remarks made me angry. Kevin, I think you've misunderstood something. I'm not a freeloader.
Yeah, whatever. Listening to a freeloader is a waste of time. I don't want to hear your excuses.
Every time I tried to explain, Kevin would cut me off like that.
Just so you know, freeloaders don't have the right to an opinion. If you want to speak, try getting into a good college like me and landing a job at a big company. I don't want to be in the same space as you. It feels like your stupidity is contagious. Why don't you grow up and move out soon?
I had lost my mom at a young age, and thinking of my family's situation, I gave up on college and started working right after high school. Even my decision to go freelance was so I could better balance work and housework when my full-time job long hours became too much. I had made all these decisions on my own, and I had no regrets. But hearing Kevin, who knew nothing about my life, say those things made me furious. Though I wanted to snap back, I kept quiet, continuing to handle all of Kevin's household needs as I always had. I had always been in the habit of holding back my feelings, so it became natural for me to suppress them. Even for someone like me, there was one person I could fully open up to and trust completely. That person was my boyfriend, Mike. Mike is 3 years older than me, and we met a few years ago through work. He has a calm personality and is like a source of peace for me, someone who soothes my soul. I shared everything about my family life with Mike. Even with my closest friends, I felt too embarrassed to talk about my family. But with Mike, I could confide in him without holding anything back. Mike always checked on me, asking if there was anything he could do to help. But honestly, just having him listen was more than enough for me. That day, after Kevin had said so many hurtful things and left me feeling emotionally unstable, I went to Mike's place to talk. We hadn't been on a real date in a while because we were both so busy, and we ended up talking for hours, losing track of time. Mike just listened to me silently. He listened with a serious expression, as if it were his own problem, and sometimes he would get even angrier than I did. I love that about Mike. After seeing him for the first time in a while, I stayed longer than I had planned. When I rushed home, Kevin had already gotten back before me.
Hey, where the hell have you been all this time? I'm starving.
Those were the first words out of Kevin's mouth as he yelled at me. Sorry, I was just at Mike's place. I'll hurry and get dinner ready now.
What? A jobless bum like you going out with a guy? Shouldn't you be looking for a job instead of playing around?
As I rushed to start preparing dinner, Kevin, clearly irritated from being hungry, snapped at me more than usual.
Can't believe a guy would even be interested in a loser like you. I bet he's just as much of a bum as you are, right? Losers attract losers. You two are perfect for each other.
Usually, I would hold back, but hearing him insult my boyfriend Mike hit a nerve. Kevin, you need to stop this right now. For the first time, I raised my voice, something I rarely did. Kevin seemed startled for a moment, but quickly regained his tough guy attitude.
Shut up. I told you not to talk back. Just make my dinner.
He spat out those words and stormed upstairs. I took a deep breath to calm myself before getting back to preparing dinner. I just felt calm after meeting Mike. After hearing such awful things, the last thing I wanted to do was make dinner for Kevin. But since I was the only one who did the chores in this house, I forced myself to swallow my anger and started cooking with a blank mind. After finishing up the household chores, I headed to my room to get back to work. With a deadline approaching, I had to make good progress tonight. I thought to myself that it was going to be another sleepless night, so I brewed a hot cup of coffee and walked to my workspace, only to find that my work laptop was missing from my desk. I was sure it had been there this morning. What? Why is it gone? I muttered to myself, and from behind me, I heard laughter.
About time you noticed.
Kevin was watching me, barely holding back his laughter at my reaction.
I threw out your laptop. It was just for playing around, right? That's why you can't get out and find a job. I did you a favor by getting rid of it. You should be thanking me. Now you can finally focus on getting a real job.
Kevin must have done this out of spite while I was downstairs doing chores. This had gone way too far, and I finally snapped. Kevin, enough is enough. That's... Before I could finish, Kevin suddenly grabbed the framed picture of my late mom from my room and threw it to the floor with all his might. It was my cherished photo, something I had held dear for years. The plastic frame of the photo stand was broken into a miserable shape.
Shut up. If you've got complaints, then get out. Seeing a loser like you just pisses me off. You're an eyesore.
Kevin shouted angrily. What did I ever do to deserve this? Why do I have to endure such treatment? I had reached my limit. Fine, I'll leave. I can't stay here anymore. I want to leave right now. That was how I honestly felt.
Finally ready to leave? Make sure you take everything and don't leave a trace. And don't ever come back.
I get it. You'll regret this, though. I answered softly. The next morning, Kevin left for school as if nothing had happened. Once he was gone, I decided to put my plan into action. That evening, I got a call from Kevin. Hello, what's up? I thought you didn't want to hear my voice anymore.
Hey, what the hell is going on here? Everything in the house is gone.
Kevin was yelling, clearly confused over the phone. You see, when Kevin came home from school, he noticed something strange and called me. When he went into the kitchen to grab a drink, the refrigerator was missing. Looking around, he realized the microwave were gone too. In other rooms, he saw that the TV and washing machine were also missing. You told me to leave, so I left. Do you have a problem with that?
You took everything from the house with you? Are you kidding me?
Oh, that. Well, fine. I'll come by tonight, and we can talk about it then. I hung up the phone after saying that. That night, I made my way to the house. As soon as I walked into the houses, Kevin was glaring at me. He must really hate me. Just as we were about to start talking, as if on cue, my dad came home. He'd been out drinking and was a bit tipsy, but sensing the tension between Kevin and me, he awkwardly joined the conversation without saying a word. As soon as the three of us were together, Kevin spoke up first.
Who the hell do you think you are, you lazy bum? You took everything from the house. That's stealing. Aren't you ashamed of yourself?
Kevin continued to lash out at me. That's when I decided it was time to reveal the truth I had been keeping quiet. Stealing? I didn't steal anything. All those appliances were mine. You told me to leave, so I took what was mine. You also said not to leave a trace, so I made sure I didn't.
You bought those? Don't lie to me, you jobless loser. Dad bought all that stuff with his hard-earned money.
Kevin sneered at me, looking at me like I was some pathetic joke. You clearly don't know anything, so let me explain. Dad hasn't worked in almost 2 years. He's unemployed. I'm the one who's been supporting this household. My dad hung his head in shame as he listened to me. Since he's just your stepdad, you probably didn't talk much with him, so you wouldn't have known. But Dad has been pretending to go to work and spending every day drinking at pub from morning till night. That's probably how he met your mom. Ever since he lost his job, he's been dipping into the family's money, claiming he's looking for work. Isn't that right, Dad?
Jessica, you knew?
Dad's voice trembled as he realized I was aware he'd been using our savings. I started investigating when things didn't add up. Dad never found a job, and our bank account kept shrinking. Turns out, Dad was wasting it all on drinking from morning till night. I thought about letting him continue for a bit longer, but I've reached my limit. We're out of money. I can't support this anymore.
So, who's been paying my college tuition?
You've always thought Dad was paying for your education, but the truth is, he hasn't contributed a cent. I've been paying for everything.
Wait, but you're a bum, right? A bum couldn't possibly have that kind of money.
Kevin looked at me, completely baffled. So, who told you I was a bum? I never once said that. I'm actually a freelance video editor now. No one else does the housework here, right? That's why I quit my office job to work from home where it's more efficient. I'm also consulting on creating viral videos now. With the growing demand for social media content, I'm making way more than I ever did as a full-time employee. That's how I've been able to support you and Dad, a jobless man, and a student.
What? I thought you were just a loser.
Kevin was at a loss for words. And by the way, ever since Dad lost his job, this house is under my name. Technically, it's you two who should have left, not me. But since neither a jobless man nor a student would have anywhere to go, I decided to be the one to leave. When I finished speaking, Kevin was so shocked that he froze in place. Dad, too ashamed to face me, looked awkward and uncomfortable. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was Mike, who had come over because he was worried about me.
Sorry, Jessica. I was worried and had to check on you.
Mike said apologetically, but his presence gave me strength. With him by my side, I turned to Kevin and Dad and spoke words I had long held back. I've spent my whole life suppressing my feelings, thinking if I just endured, everything would work out. I paid off the mortgage for Dad, covered Kevin's tuition because he was abandoned by his mom, and lived for my family. But I don't deserve to be treated like this. From now on, I'm done. I'm selling this houses and won't be paying any more tuition. I'm going to live my life freely. For the first time, I told them clearly that I would cut ties and no longer provide any financial support. It might have been the first time I had ever expressed my feelings so openly. Dad hung his head in defeat, his shoulders slumped, but Kevin was different. Perhaps his pride was wounded, knowing the person he had looked down on had been supporting him out of pity because he was abandoned by his mom.
Thanks for paying my tuition all this time. Not many people would go that far, but you were stupid enough to do it. Actually, I've already got a job offer. It's from a well-known local company with great benefits, so I'm set for life. I'll be just fine once I'm out in the real world. I can handle things on my own.
Kevin tried to act tough. This was the first time I'd heard he had his job offer, but I knew the company he was talking about. Hey, could that company you got an offer from be? I mentioned the name of a company I had in mind.
Yeah, that's the one. Even someone as clueless as you has probably heard of it. It's a big name company, not something a high school grad like you could ever get into.
Kevin responded smugly, but Mike and I exchanged surprised looks. That company? That's Mike's company. He's the CEO. You didn't even know the face of the CEO at the company where you got a job offer? Kevin couldn't hide his shock at my words.
What? Your boyfriend is the CEO?
Sorry for the late introduction. I'm dating Jessica with the intention of marriage.
Mike introduced himself to my dad and Kevin. The moment Kevin realized Mike was the CEO, he suddenly changes his attitude.
Actually, I was just worried about Jessica. She's getting older and still hadn't settled down, so I thought pushing her out of the house might help. It seems I was right. I'm glad to see she's finally getting married, and as her brother, I'm relieved. And who knows, maybe once you two are married, I could be in line to be the next CEO.
Kevin said this with a laugh, clearly trying to cozy up to Mike. Talk about a change of heart.
Mike, let's keep helping each other.
Kevin said this to Mike, extending his hand for a handshake. But Mike responded to Kevin with these words.
Sorry, but you're not the kind of person we want at our company. We value the character of our employees, and clearly, our hiring department made a mistake selecting someone like you. I'll be sure to speak with HR. Your job's offer is rescinded.
What?
And both of you, think about all the trouble you've caused Jessica and the horrible things you've said to her. You owe her a sincere apology.
Dad and Kevin stood there in stunned silence. Leaving them behind, Mike and I walked out of that house. As we were leaving, they desperately tried to apologize and stop us. But my mind was already made up. No matter how much they apologized, I wasn't going to forgive them. After leaving that house, I began the process of selling it. Luckily, a buyer was found quickly, and Dad and Kevin had to move out right away. Since I cut ties with them, I don't know what happened to them after I left that house. From what I've heard from a neighbor, they rented a small, cheap apartment nearby and moved in together. Without a job and worried about living alone, Dad seems to have decided he had no choice but to rely on Kevin, so the two of them now live together. However, since they both depended on my money all this time, they don't have much savings. With no steady income, they couldn't afford new furniture or appliances in their new apartment. Apparently, Dad went around the neighborhood asking if anyone had unwanted appliances they could give him. Kevin, needing to pay for his own tuition now, took on multiple jobs, working both day and night. Rumor has it that he's close to failing and might have to repeat a year because he's been working so much that he doesn't have time to sleep. They have been living off my money and enjoying themselves all this time. I'm sure they're finally realizing just how hard it is to earn money. Because of his age, Dad has struggled to find a new job and is getting by on temporary day labor. However, the tabs he ran up at the pubs he used to frequent have piled up, and now he's scrambling to pay them off. I feel for him, but at the same time, it's his own fault. Today, I'm still using the laptop Kevin threw away that day, working hard as always. When I told Mike about what happened, he immediately contacted the junk removal service, and they were able to find it for me. That laptop is an essential tool for my work. I was truly relieved when the laptop was safely returned to me. Now, without Dad or Kevin causing me any more trouble, I can focus on work better than ever, and I finally have time for myself. Mike's company is also doing great, and we're both busy with work. In the midst of our hectic schedules, we've been making time to visit wedding venues together. Yes, we're getting married in 3 months. With our wedding coming up, we've been busy meeting with the planner and picking out my wedding dress. But despite the chaos, I'm happier than I've ever been. It's the first time I've dedicated this much time to myself. I'm finally living my own life. And now I'm starting a new chapter with the man I love. My name is Emily Dickinson. I've been dating him for a year. We finally got to have the wedding we dreamed of. Our friends congratulated us, and it was supposed to be the happiest reception ever. But toward the end of the reception, his drunk CO, Thomas, said something outrageous.
The groom is my pregnant daughter's lover. I don't approve of this wedding. Right, Mr. Groom?
It was a bombshell. Looking around the room, all the guests fell silent. My parents were stunned. The same went for his relatives, while only his CO was laughing loudly, clearly full of himself. Among them, his CO's daughter was giving him a passionate look, and her stomach was noticeably swollen. I didn't know her, so I thought she was just someone he knew. But finding out she was his lover, that was a huge shock. Harold, what's going on? I turned to him and spoke, but his face was pale. Sweat was beading on his forehead, and his lips were trembling. Hey, what that guy said isn't true, right?
Well.
His mind was probably blank. Even if he wanted to say something, no words seemed to come out. Now that I think about it, I had seen a woman who seemed like her a few times while on dates with him. The mistress must have been worried about him with me, watching from a distance. This is just too much. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I hung my head, speechless. I had met him through a friend's introduction. It was during a gathering where a bunch of us were drinking and having a good time. I had just gone through a breakup, and my friend thought it would be a good idea for me to start a new romance. But I wasn't ready to think about love, so I couldn't accept meeting him.
I know it's hard to enjoy anything right after a breakup, but times like these are exactly when you need a change of pace.
Saying that, he took me to the movies and invited me to an amusement park.
You don't have to have romantic feelings. Just hang out as friends. You know, having fun is what matters most, right?
He stayed by my side like that. He was so kind and seemed to understand my pain. As time passed, my wounds healed, and Harold gradually filled my empty heart. And before I knew it, my heart was full of him. Half a year later, I confessed my feelings to him. I love you.
Finally, my feelings got through to you. I'm so happy.
That's how our relationship began. I found myself more and more attracted to his sincerity, and I fell deeper in love with him. It was on a summer night when he proposed to me. While watching the big fireworks bloom in the sky, he presented a ring.
Will you marry me? I want you by my side forever.
It was on our first anniversary of our first date. Am I the one for you?
Of course. It has to be you, Emily.
It was the perfect setting. A proposal every woman dreams of. I couldn't say anything but yes to someone who proposed so wonderfully. I'm so happy. I want to be with you forever too. When he came to my house to ask for my hand in marriage, he stood tall, looking my parents straight in the eye.
Please let me marry her.
My parents looked happy, but my mom asked why he chose me. He said without hesitation,
I love everything about Emily. Her smile, her kindness, her compassion. I can't thank you enough for raising such an amazing woman.
Looking back now, it was like he had memorized it straight out of a textbook. Preparing for the wedding was tough, but the thought of marrying him made me so happy that I convinced myself it was okay, even though he was too busy to come with me to choose the venue. My friends said it was strange that he wouldn't come along for a once-in-a-lifetime wedding. But I trusted him. Still, how could I have imagined that everything would fall apart like this? I could hear the murmurs of the crowd, and then I heard my friend's voice.
Emily, how sad.
At that moment, my usually calm father stood up and walked to the stage.
Emily,
Dad,
that's enough. It's over.
I'm sorry. My father took my hand and helped me up.
What is it? Are you trying to justify yourself? If you have an excuse, you should tell Thomas, your drunk CEO, instead, especially since you're in a relationship with his daughter.
My father glared at him, his face filled with rage. Then he spoke loudly.
Thomas, I'm canceling all the $10 million deal with your company.
What?
Thomas, who had been laughing loudly, suddenly froze.
President Dickinson, please don't. If you do that, my company will go bankrupt.
Shut up. That's not my problem.
I'm sorry. I beg your pardon. Please.
Harold knelt down on the spot to apologize, but my father's anger was far from subsiding.
You are no longer eligible to be my son-in-law. Consider this engagement canceled. I won't let a man like you marry my precious daughter.
Please, please, I'm begging you. Emily, please stop your father. I'm begging you.
Shut up. Don't address my daughter so casually. Emily, let's go.
Okay. My father took my hand, and our family left the venue, returning home in silence. But even after we got home, I was too shocked to say anything. My parents seemed equally lost for words. When I went to my room, I overheard my parents talking.
This is unbelievable. He was having an affair with the CEO's daughter.
Yeah, it really is.
That CEO knew Harold and his daughter were involved. So why did he push for Emily to marry him?
Who knows? Maybe he feared something like this would happen.
Something like this.
The $10 million deal being canceled. Without our business, that company is likely to collapse.
Yeah, you're probably right. So does that mean Harold was trying to marry Emily for that reason, too?
Who knows? Either way, I can't allow such dishonesty. I'm not going to let it end like this. He made Emily cry and made a fool of me. I'll never forgive him.
My father's voice was filled with more hatred than I had ever heard before. That night, I had no appetite, and I just cried endlessly in my bed. Then my phone rang, and it was Harold.
Emily, it's me, Harold. I'm really sorry about what happened. Are you okay?
Of course, I wasn't okay. This hurt way more than any breakup I'd ever experienced.
I'm truly sorry for what happened. I'll apologize as many times as it takes, even 100 times. So please, cheer up, okay?
Cheer up. Is that what he thinks this is about?
Come on, something like this isn't going to destroy your relationship, right?
Something like this.
Yeah, that's right. It was just something like this. It wasn't worth canceling the wedding over.
Why not? Your CO said his daughter was your mistress, didn't he? Doesn't that mean you betrayed me?
No, that's not true. The CEO is just mistaken. I'd never betray you like that.
Then why did he say that?
He must have confused me with someone else.
Is that so? Then why didn't you deny it right away? You looked so panicked and pale.
Anyone would be shocked if something like that happened in the middle of a wedding.
His daughter was staring at you.
Let's stop this. Talking about it isn't going to change anything.
Is that right? I don't think so.
More importantly, if things continue like this, the company will go bankrupt. Isn't there a way to keep the $10 million deal going?
Why are you telling me this?
You're the only daughter of the Dickinson family, aren't you? If anyone can ask your dad, it's you.
It's impossible. Unless the doubts about you are cleared, my dad won't listen. And to me, the mistress issue is far bigger than the $10 million deal.
Don't be ridiculous. If the company goes under, I'll lose my job.
If it turns out the mistress issue is really a misunderstanding, and the company still goes bankrupt, you can join Dickinson Corporation. I'm an only child, so if you join Dickinson, you'll have a decent position.
I like my current company. I want to do the work I'm doing now. Sure, joining Dickinson might mean a promotion, but a man's job is more than that.
I see. But you know, I can't trust you. For your CEO to say something like that at the reception, it has to be something serious. It just doesn't make sense otherwise.
So you don't want to marry me?
Until recently, I wanted to be your wife. But I can marry someone I don't trust.
Why can't you understand?
Isn't the most important thing right now fixing our relationship? Yet all you're worried about is the $10 million deal. Hearing that doesn't make me feel loved at all.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking about your feelings, Emily. I got too caught up with work. I'm really sorry, but I really do love you, Emily. That's why I'm calling you now, isn't it?
If you truly loved me, wouldn't you have stopped me when I was leaving the venue? But you didn't even try. The first thing you said was to ask my dad to reconsider canceling the deal.
That's because of work.
I can understand why you'd prioritize work that much. Isn't being rejected for marriage more important?
Please, stop. You're the only one I love. There's no one else. That's why I proposed. And yet, I'm the one being doubted over something like this. Try to understand how I feel too.
Are you considering my feelings? You haven't thought about my feelings at all, but you're asking me to think about yours? That's impossible. At that moment, all my friends were pitying me. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? You don't seem to care at all.
Let's stop this pointless argument. Besides, talking over the phone isn't helping us understand each other. Let's meet in person. If we talk in person, we'll be able to understand each other.
No, I don't want to see you for a while. I need some time to cool off. With that, I hung up the phone. But later, I thought about it and realized that running away without facing him wasn't the answer. However, the person I needed to meet wasn't him. The person I needed to talk to was his mistress. So I decided to hire a private investigator to look into him. I figured if they investigated him, they would find out who his mistress was and get her contact information. Sure enough, about 10 days after I made the request, I received a report. It contained a lot of information about the woman. Now that I had her contact details, I reached out to her right away. I asked her if we could meet. At first, she was hesitant, but eventually, she agreed. We arranged a day, and when I arrived at the appointed time, I found myself at her apartment. When she led me inside, the room was filled with baby supplies. I'm sorry for bothering you at your house.
No, I'm sorry you had to come all the way here. Since I'm pregnant, I can't really move around much.
Wow, you have so many baby supplies.
Yes.
Is the baby really Harold's child? Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be sarcastic. I just want to know if it's true.
I understand. It's unfortunate, but yes, it's really his child.
I see. How long have you been together?
For over 2 years now.
So I came into the picture later.
Yes, that's correct.
Did you know about me?
No, I only found out he had a girlfriend about 6 months ago.
So he was two-timing us. Where did you meet him?
At one of my father's company gatherings. I don't work at my father's company, but he told me to show up every once in a while.
I see. If you're pregnant, why haven't you married him?
Because by the time I found out I was pregnant, he had already started dating you. I couldn't tell him I was pregnant.
Why not?
Because my father was happy about his relationship with you.
What do you mean?
You're the daughter of Dickinson Corporation. My father said that if you and Harold got married, a big contract would go through.
So, even after finding out you were pregnant, he still didn't want to marry you.
He said the company would go bankrupt without that deal with Dickinson Corporation. He had to marry you to keep the company alive. That's why he couldn't marry me.
Your parents wouldn't allow that, right?
My mom says it's sad for me, but my dad is the same as him. No, maybe even more focused on work. My dad said I could still have the child and raise it even if I stayed as the mistress. And since the $10 million deal would be lost, I was told to give up on him.
So you thought it was okay to just stay as the mistress?
I'm sorry. It was the only option I had.
That's so unfair to the baby.
Of course, I cried and said I didn't want that. I wanted to marry him, and the baby needs a father, but my dad wouldn't allow it. On the contrary, he even told him to keep me as his mistress and make sure to successfully marry Emily, no matter what. He said it was a big project.
How awful. So, in other words, Harold chose to marry me, not because of love, but because of the work-related benefits it would bring, just for the deal and to keep the company going?
I think so. Still, there was a time when he leaned towards marrying me despite everything. He even brought it up to my dad.
Then why didn't it happen?
My dad said that if he insisted on marrying me, he'd fire him.
That's terrible.
He said that if he wanted to continue seeing me, he should deceive you well enough.
If he went that far, then why did your father say what he did at the reception?
I don't know either. Maybe deep down, he really wanted us to get married. But he was thinking about the company and told me to stay as the mistress. Perhaps he lost control after drinking too much. It's all just speculation, though.
I see. So, what do you want to do from here?
What?
What do you want to do now?
Well, I'd like to somehow secure the $10 million deal. That's what my dad and he want.
I can't marry him anymore. Even so, are you still clinging to the contract?
I have no choice.
You have a child, so I think you should be the one to marry him. As we were talking, Harold entered the room. He hadn't expected to see me there, and his eyes went wide in shock.
Why is Emily here?
So this is what you meant when you said it was all a lie.
No, it's not like that.
Entering a woman's apartment, uninvited, is a clear indication of your relationship. I've heard everything from her.
Mary, you told her.
I'm sorry. I just couldn't lie anymore.
Unbelievable. Emily, I'm sorry. I truly regret everything. But I love you, Emily. I came here to end things with Mary.
End things? There's no need. I'm done being deceived. You should marry her.
What are you talking about? You're the only one for me, Emily.
You were only planning to marry me for the deal, weren't you? Even though she was pregnant, you wanted to marry me while still keeping her hidden.
That wasn't my intention.
It doesn't matter anymore. I know everything now. You probably wanted to marry Mary, right? So go ahead and be with her. Everything is clear now, and I don't need you to remember me anymore.
Wait, Emily.
Harold chased after me, but I closed the door and quickly left. When I returned home, a wave of anger washed over me. This was an anger unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. There was no way I could let this end just like that, so when my father came home, I told him everything that had happened.
So that's what it was. What a despicable man, using my daughter as a bargaining tool. I can't forgive Harold, and I can't forgive that CEO either.
Dad, I want to get revenge on those two.
I understand. Leave it to me. I'll make them regret it more than anything.
About a month later, I got a call from Harold. He sounded pretty desperate.
Emily, I need a favor.
A favor? What is it? I'll listen at least.
The truth is, the company is about to go under.
It hasn't gone bankrupt yet?
No, that's why I need your help.
What do you think I can do?
The $10 million deal with Dickinson Corporation. If that deal falls through, my company is finished. If that happens, the company will lose all its value.
And how does that concern me?
No, you don't get it. If the company goes under, a lot of employees will be out on the street.
So, it still has nothing to do with me.
No, Emily, you're the only one who can save my company.
I can't. I don't have that kind of power.
Please, talk to your father, the president of Dickinson Corporation.
Why should I? Do I owe you all that? And by the way, what's happening with your marriage to Mary? Make sure to invite me to the wedding. I'll come as the representative of the women you deceived.
I haven't married Mary yet.
Well, if you keep dragging your feet, she'll give birth before you know it.
The CEO keeps telling me I have to marry you no matter what. If I can't do that and the deal doesn't happen, he said he'll fire me.
That sounds tough. Then why not just marry her, even if it means getting fired?
That's why I need to secure the deal with Dickinson Corporation to get married.
That's not my responsibility.
You're the only one I can ask, Emily.
Talk to my father directly.
Of course I talked to him. I even apologized and begged for forgiveness. But it was no use. He wouldn't listen at all.
Well, that's understandable. After what happened, my dad was furious. This isn't something that can be forgiven just by asking. Why don't you bring your CO with you? You haven't tried that yet, right? Expecting you to handle it alone is wrong. After all, it was the CEO who started this whole mess.
All right, I'll ask him. If I do that, will you at least listen to us?
You won't know until you try. Just thinking about it won't help.
Yeah.
That night, Harold showed up at our house with his CEO. The CEO, on his part, seemed to think this wasn't something that required his presence, and he couldn't hide his annoyed expression.
Please, I'm begging you. Can't we just put this behind us? Harold is a capable worker and a determined man. If you could move forward with the engagement and join hands with our company, we would be most grateful.
Do you really think that's possible? Even if I were to let my precious daughter marry a man who betrayed her, there'd be no benefit for us.
But if things stay as they are, our company will go bankrupt.
I can forgive what you all did. Whether you go bankrupt or not, that's none of my concern.
Please, save the employees. Don't help us. Help the innocent employees who know nothing of this.
I see. So you want me to save the employees?
Yes, if things stay like this, the employees will be left out in the cold. They've all worked hard for the company. We can't abandon them.
I understand. That is indeed unfortunate. Then I'll buy your company.
What?
And if I make it a subsidiary of our company, the employees will be saved, right?
But our company has grown rapidly, so we can't sell for just any price.
What are you talking about? You're practically bankrupt. There isn't a company out there that would buy you for a high price. Yet here I am, willing to buy it.
Okay, how about $30 million then?
Do you think I'm saying this without knowing anything? Your company's stock has plummeted. There's no way I'd buy it for $30 million. And let's not forget, this situation is of your own making.
That's true, but
restoring trust and breathing life back into the company is going to be tough. Even factoring in working capital, $1 million is about as much as it's worth. With that, you should be able to live out the rest of your life.
That's way too low.
Oh, then just let the company go bankrupt. I'm fine with that.
Okay. Please, $1 million it is.
Good. I'll have the contract drawn up tomorrow, so come by the office.
Yes.
All right, you can leave now.
The CEO slumped his shoulders and left the house, but Harold stayed behind, looking like he wanted to say something.
What is it?
Sir, you'll look after the employees, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Does that include me?
Are you an employee?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, I thought you held a position. Well, fine. You can stay with the company.
Thank you so much.
Harold bowed deeply, clearly overjoyed, but he had no idea this was part of my father's plan.
By the way, you do realize there's zero chance of you marrying Emily, right?
Yes, I'm just grateful to stay with the company.
Good. Then go ahead and marry that mistress of yours.
Yes, that's my plan.
Glad to hear it.
Thank you again for everything.
Well, I hope you find happiness.
Harold was happy, not understanding what my father truly meant. But as things settled in the company, his fate was decided.
What? What's going on here?
A shocked Harold went straight to the CEO, my dad, to confront him.
Sir, I was considered promising for the future. That's why I got promoted to assistant manager at such a young age. So why am I being demoted to a regular employee all of a sudden?
Listen, You had a fiancé, and yet you had a mistress. And on top of that, you got her pregnant. This has become quite the rumor in the company. It's only natural you'd face some consequences, don't you think?
But still, isn't this too much?
If you're not happy with this decision, you're free to quit anytime. Of course, if you resign, your severance pay will be significantly reduced, but that's your choice.
I understand.
Harold couldn't argue and had to accept it, but the rumors continued to spread, and every day he was met with cold stares from the female employees and laughter from the male employees, who thought he was a fool. Mentally exhausted, he requested a transfer himself. Even though his child was about to be born, his new assignment was to a freezing cold location.
Why are you going to a place like that?
I didn't think I'd be transferred to somewhere like that either.
That's because you requested a transfer. The baby's about to be born, and now this. You've got to be kidding me.
Come with me, please.
No way. You got demoted from assistant manager to a regular employee. That's bad enough, but now you're getting sent off to some freezing place. You're completely useless. I can't trust my life to a guy like that.
What do you mean?
I mean, I'm breaking up with you.
Why would you break up now? We're finally about to get married.
I only thought you were a good catch because you seemed promising for the future. But now, after the company got sold, this is what happened. In the end, you turned out to be useless. Go there by yourself.
This is ridiculous.
Harold, abandoned even by his mistress, went off to his transfer all alone. As for Thomas, he now lives with his family, but both his wife and daughter treat him coldly, and it seems he doesn't feel like he's really living. He tried to get close to the child that was born, but even his grandchild wouldn't give him the time of day. He regrets not simply allowing his daughter to marry honestly instead of hatching such a ridiculous plan, but it's too late now. As for Harold, he was working alone in the freezing location, finding the solitude unbearable. The life where he couldn't talk to anyone shredded the pride he once had, when he was considered promising. In the end, unable to endure that kind of life, he decided it'd be better to go back home and quit the company. However, what awaited him was the harsh reality of being unemployed with no income. Though he managed to find an apartment as soon as he resigned, word went out to various companies warning against hiring him, so no one would take him in. Especially companies in the same industry. They wouldn't hire him under any circumstances, and he had to live off day labor. He contacted me the other day, expressing regret for everything that happened. He said he wanted to start over from scratch, but his lazy approach, reaching out to an ex just because he was struggling, angered me, so I introduced him to a lovely woman. She's a very devoted friend of mine, the type to hold tight to a man once she decides he's her partner. But for a cheater like him, she's probably just right. As for me, I think I'll be keeping my distance from romance for a while. Having lost trust in men, I'm now focusing on my career,